I was alone that night, as I always was. The night dispatcher's office smells like stale coffee and rain, even when it isn't raining. And that night, it was raining, not a little drizzle, but the kind of rain that pounds on the asphalt, turning the road into a slick mirror that reflects nothing but the blur of headlights and neon signs. I remember watching the storm through the window, feeling the same weight I always feel on nights like that, the kind of weight that makes you realize how small and temporary everything is. The call came in just past 2. A car stalled on Highway 37. Nothing unusual about that. Really, cars stall all the time. People call in, someone comes, checks it, all ends quietly. But even in that small, ordinary sentence, I felt something shift. Something that made the hair of the back of my neck stand up, the way it does when you can't quite explain why a room feels cold, even when the heater is on. I grabbed my coat, the one that smells faintly of smoke and leather, and stepped into the rain. The world outside was a blur of gray and black, punctuated by the harsh yellow of my headlights. The storm was thick, like a living thing pressing down on me, weighing my shoulders. I drove slowly. Highway 37 stretches for miles, lonely, flat, lined with trees that bend and sway as if whispering to one another. The windshield wipers cut through the rain in uneven sweeps. Every few seconds, I glanced at the rearview mirror. There was nothing there, of course, just my own eyes, wide and tired, reflecting back at me. But I felt watched. I always do. By the time I reached the spot, the road was empty except for the car, sitting there in the middle like it had been abandoned in a hurry. Headlights off, hazard lights blinking faintly, a rhythm that seemed almost like a heartbeat. I slowed to a stop a few yards behind it and killed the engine. The rain slapped against the roof in irregular rhythms. And for a second, I couldn't hear myself think. Then I heard it, a faint tapping, like someone drumming their fingers on metal. I stepped out, boots sinking slightly into the wet shoulder of the road, and my hand went instinctively to the gun at my hip. Habit, not fear. Yet, the car was a dark sedan, older model. Nothing about it screamed danger, not at first. But the driver's side window was cracked open just a fraction. Steam rose from inside, curling and twisting like smoke from a funeral pyre. And there, in the driver's seat, was a man. I froze. Not the usual kind of freeze you get when you're startled. A heavier, deeper kind. The man's face was pale, almost washed out by the storm's dim light. His eyes wide and unblinking. He wasn't moving, not at first. And then he turned his head slowly, just enough for me to see that he was looking right at me. His lips didn't move. He didn't say a word, but I knew I was there. "Sir," I called, my voice sounding small against the roar of the rain. "Are you okay?" The car didn't respond. Nothing. I stepped closer, my boots sloshing through the water gathering on the asphalt. The closer I got, the more I felt it, a cold that wasn't from the rain, a cold that sank into my chest and settled over my ribs. The man didn't flinch, didn't breathe, and then I noticed something impossible. The car had no license plate, not a temporary tag, not a permanent one, just empty. I frowned, leaning in closer. The storm blurred the edges of everything, but I swore the man's face shifted subtly in ways it shouldn't have, like a shadow sliding across a wall. My heartbeat kicked up, fast, ragged. I leaned down, peering into the window. My reflection overlapped with his, and for a second, I thought I saw my own face, pale and lifeless, staring back at me. The moment passed. I shook my head, trying to tell myself it was just the rain and the glass. Then, as I straightened, the tapping began again, louder this time. Not the rhythmic drip of rain, but deliberate, mechanical, like someone knocking on metal from the inside. My hand went to the door handle, and it turned under my grip, smooth, almost too smooth, like it wasn't resisting at all. I opened the door. The smell hit me first. Not smoke, not gasoline, but something sour and rotten, like wet soil mixed with old iron. And then I saw it, his hands. Thin, pale, resting on the steering wheel, but wrong. The fingers were too long. The knuckles bent at angles that shouldn't exist. I swallowed hard. My stomach clenched, and for a moment, I considered stepping back. letting the rain swallow the whole scene and pretending I'd never seen it. But I didn't. I couldn't. Sir, I said again, louder, you need help. Nothing. Just that eerie tapping. Then, slowly and possibly, the man moved. Not in a human way. His body shifted, bones cracking, joints bending in ways that screamed of something unnatural. He looked at me and, for the first time, smiled. Not a friendly smile. A smile like the storm itself had formed a mouth. Cold, wide, unending. I stumbled back, slipping on the wet asphalt, my gun still holstered. I wanted to run. I wanted to drive away and never think of this place again. But I couldn't. Something held me there, rooted to the ground like the trees lining the road. And then he spoke, not with words. Not really. The sound that came out was a wet, gurgling whisper, like air escaping from underwater. But I understood it. Somehow I did. Don't leave, it said. Stay with me. I can't explain how I understood. Logic tells me it shouldn't have been possible. And yet, the words slithered into my mind, curling around my thoughts like smoke. Panic rose, thick and suffocating. I stumbled back, tripping over my own feet, and for a moment, the rain seemed to stop. The world went silent. And then I saw it. The road behind me, stretching endlessly, curving into a dark that wasn't night, but something worse, something alive. And in that dark, I thought I saw figures. Shadows, maybe, faces, people I couldn't recognize, but knew somehow, watching me, waiting. I backed up, my heart hammering, until I hit the patrol car. I fumbled with the keys, got the door open, and slid inside. The warmth hit me like a wave, but it didn't chase away the cold in my chest. I watched the sedan through the windshield, rain streaking my vision, and when I blinked, it was gone. Just the road. Empty. The tapping, the smile, the whisper, all gone. I told myself it had been a trick of the storm. Fatigue. Stress. But deep down, I knew better. I knew I hadn't imagined it. And that thought alone is worse than any storm, any dark road, any shadow. I radioed in the call. Nothing here. Car's gone. Must have moved on. My voice sounded hollow even to me. The dispatcher, my partner on the other end, laughed softly. Just a stalled car, huh? She said. You've been at this too long. Get some rest. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. I drove back, eyes darting to every shadow, every glint of rain. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. Not by a car, not by someone on foot. Something else. Something older than the road, older than the storm, watching from just beyond the reach of my headlights. And I wondered, not for the first time, what would happen if I stopped. Stopped driving. Stopped moving. Would it wait? Would it come closer? I didn't want to know. But even now, months later, I can still feel that night pressing down on me. Highway 37 isn't just asphalt and lines and trees. It's a memory, a warning. And that man, he wasn't supposed to exist. I can't explain how I know it, but I do. And every time the wind picks up, or rain hammers the roof, or the night stretches longer than it should, I think of him. And I wonder if he's still out there, waiting for someone else, watching from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to tap. Just tap, tap, tap. I wasn't supposed to be alone that night, but the station was quiet, and quiet in that place always felt heavier than the storm outside. The kind of heavy that presses against your chest until you feel the walls closing in. The storm hadn't let up since the call on Highway 37, and I could hear rain drumming against the roof, a constant reminder that the world outside was still moving, still alive, even if I felt frozen. I pulled up the body cam footage on my monitor, the glow from the screen cutting through the dark office. I had watched it a dozen times already, but each time it made me swallow a little harder, made the room feel colder. The footage was from the night after the Highway 37 call. A routine check. Well, it should have been routine. But there she was, the girl, in the passenger seat. I don't remember finding her. Not really. And that's what makes it worse. The camera shows a patrol car idling in the rain, headlights slicing through the dark, the windshield smeared with water. My own hands tighten around the steering wheel on the footage, just like they did in real life. fumbling with the door locks, the radio. And then there she is, sitting silently beside me, eyes fixed on the dashboard, as if she had always belonged there. Her hair was damp, plastered against her face, streaked with dirt. She looked no older than 12, maybe 13. Her jacket was too big, sleeves hanging past her hands, but she didn't shiver, not even when the rain hammered the roof of the car, not when the windshield wipers rattled in uneven sweeps. She just sat there, watching me. I rewind the footage again, slow it down, and I can see it. The way her eyes follow my every movement, the way she tilts her head, slightly when I reach for the radio. It's not natural, not human, and yet there she is, in every frame, calm, still impossible. I remember reaching over to open the passenger door. I don't remember why. Maybe I want to see if she was real. Maybe I wanted to make sure I wasn't imagining it. My hand trembled as it brushed against the cold metal, and the camera caught it. Every flicker of doubt, every pause. I never opened the door. I couldn't. And then she spoke, not with words. Not really. The sound was soft, almost like wind passing through leaves, but it hit me in the chest like a hammer. Drive, she said, and I swear I understood. I didn't question it. I just drove. The roads were empty, deserted, slick with rain. Streetlights flickered in the distance, struggling to stay alive. The girl didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe audibly, but I could feel her presence pressing against my side, a weight that grew heavier the longer we drove. Every mirror reflected her face, sometimes overlapping with mine, and each time my stomach clenched tighter. I told myself it was exhaustion, stress, the storm playing tricks on my eyes. But I knew better. Hours passed, though it didn't feel like hours. Time had a way of stretching and folding when she was there. The rain became louder, a roar in my ears, and yet the inside of the car stayed unnaturally quiet. Her silence amplified against the sound of the storm. My hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white, and I realized I hadn't spoken a word. Not to her, not to myself. Not even to the radio that lay dead beside me. At one point, I glanced down at her. She was staring straight ahead, but her eyes, they weren't hers. Not entirely. There was something behind them, something dark, endless, that made the hair at the back of my neck stand up. I jerked my gaze back to the road, telling myself I was imagining it, but the feeling didn't leave. It never left. I remember reaching a bend, sharp and narrow, the kind that forces you to slow down, to pay attention. I slowed careful, and in the corner of my eye, I saw her smile. Not a child's smile, not innocent. It was too wide, too knowing, like she had seen everything and waited years for this moment. My stomach turned, bowel rising, and I nearly swerved. The rest of the footage is a blur. My hands shaking, my chest burning, my mind screaming at me to stop, to pull over, to get rid of her. But I didn't. I couldn't. There's something in her presence that changes you, that makes you move even when every instinct screams to freeze. We drove through small towns, through forests, through stretches of road that shouldn't exist on any map I know. And everywhere we went, the world felt wrong. Empty buildings, broken streetlights, fog that clung low to the ground. And always she was there, watching, silent, unmoving, impossible. I tried to speak once. Just a word. Who are you? My voice sounded alien, foreign, even to me. The girl didn't respond. But the camera caught it. Her eyes flicked toward me. In that flicker, it was enough. Enough to tell me that she had heard, understood, and didn't need to answer. Hours turned into something else. Minutes felt like years. And then the car stopped. I don't remember why. The footage doesn't show it. It just stops. And for a moment, there's silence. No rain, no wipers, nothing but the steady hum of the patrol car's engine. And when I look over, she's gone. Just gone. No door open. No footsteps in the water. No hint that she had ever been there. Only the passenger seat, empty, damp, smelling faintly of rain and soil. I rewound the footage again and again, looking for any clue. A trick of the camera? A reflection? But no, there was nothing. Only the memory of her eyes, her smile, her impossible stillness. I can't explain it. I don't know how she got in, how she got out, or why. And the worst part, no one else remembers her. The other officers, the dispatcher, even the reports. There's no mention, no evidence, just me and that memory, pressing against me like the storm pressing against the car windows. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and think I hear the tapping, not on metal, but in my skull, soft, insistent, calling me back. I see her face in the rear view mirror just for a second before blinking. And every time I remember that drive, that silent, endless drive with someone who shouldn't exist. I've tried to tell myself it was a hallucination, exhaustion, sleep deprivation, storm-induced paranoia. But deep down, I know better. I know what I saw. I know she was there. And every time I see a passenger seat, even in an empty car, I imagine her sitting there silent, smiling, waiting. I don't know if she's still out there, waiting for someone else. Maybe another lonely patrol officer. Maybe someone who will see her like I did and understand too late that she doesn't belong in this world. I don't talk about it. Not really. The others would laugh. They'd call me crazy, call it a trick of the storm, of fatigue. But I know what I know, and I carry it with me, like a weight, like the storm itself pressed into my chest. Sometimes when the rain falls and the wipers cut through the dark, I think about that drive, about the roads we took that don't exist, about the silence that wasn't silence. And I wonder if I had stopped, if I had turned around, if I had asked differently, would she have stayed, or would I have disappeared too, swallowed by the impossible road, the impossible passenger? I don't drive alone anymore. Not at night, not when it rains. But even in daylight, when the world looks normal, I feel her presence sometimes. Just a flicker in the corner of my eye, just a whisper of a smile. And I know that no matter how far I go, no matter how fast I drive, she's out there, waiting, watching, silent. I was alone in the dispatch office again, the kind of alone that makes you aware of every creak, every hum, every flicker of the fluorescent lights overhead. The rain had stopped, or maybe it never really stopped. Sometimes you can't tell with this part town. The air smelled faintly of wet asphalt and burnt coffee, and my eyes burned from staring too long at the array of screens in front of me. It started with a scratch in the static. I thought it was my imagination, that tired mind tricking me again, because after all these radios, they're old, worn out, prone to interference. But then the words came, clear, unmistakable. Names I hadn't heard in years. Calls I had listened to when I was new, when everything seemed simpler. Unit 4, we got a report of a stalled vehicle on Highway 37. I froze. That was the night I first saw him. That night I almost lost myself in the storm. I rubbed my eyes, telling myself I misheard it, but the voice repeated, word for word, over the same frequency. Unit 4, stalled vehicle, Highway 37. Please advise. The room felt colder suddenly, my breath fogged in front of me, and I realized I was holding my own hands tightly, knuckles white. I leaned closer to the radio, half expecting anyone, to explain it. There was no one, just static and the occasional soft hum of the lights above. Then another voice came through, one I hadn't heard in a long time. Officer Jennings, dead for over 5 years. Dispatch, 12B to 7. We have a disturbance at the old mill. His voice trembled, the same way I remembered it trembling when he called it in. But that night, he never made it. I leaned back, heart hammering, staring at the speaker as if I could force it to make sense. Maybe it was interference, some glitch that twisted old recordings into the present. I wanted to believe that. I needed to, but the next words left no room for explanation. 12B to dispatch. I repeat, disturbance at the old mill. Repeat, disturbance at the old mill. The repetition wasn't normal. Radios glitch all the time, but this felt deliberate, heavy, like the past was pressing itself into the present. I reached over to mute it, but my hand froze midair, because then my own voice came through. Dispatch, Highway 37. Repeat, Highway 37. I jerked back, hard in my throat. That was me. Weeks ago, months ago, maybe even years. I don't know anymore, but I know it wasn't now. My voice coming through that ancient speaker, repeating things I had said before, in calls that had already ended, words I had buried in memory. And then a new voice, one I didn't recognize. Soft, whispering, carried over the static. You hear them, don't you? I froze. My hand shook, hovering over the mute button. My ears strained, trying to make sense of sound. It wasn't a radio glitch. It wasn't interference. It was someone or something speaking to me directly, hidden in the echoes of old calls. I pressed my palm to my forehead. I had to calm down. I had to rationalize. Radios glitch. Old officers' voices can be played back in error. Memories can trick you. But deep down, I knew the truth. Deep down, I knew the dead weren't supposed to call in. The chatter kept layering itself over the normal transmissions, one over the other, overlapping, jumbled, distorted. I could hear names, addresses, accidents, missing persons. Some were cases I had handled personally, others older, cases that had been cold for decades. I recognized the sorrow in those voices, not the panic or anger of a living person on a call, but the emptiness of someone trapped between worlds, repeating the moment they couldn't escape. Then the sound changed, the words slowed, a long pause stretched between transmissions, and in that silence, I could hear it, something creeping low and rhythmic beneath the static. A heartbeat maybe, but not human, not like any living thing I had ever known. It echoed in my skull. I could feel it, pressing, pulling, waiting. I tried turning off the radios, unplugging everything, but the voices didn't stop. They came from the speakers on the walls, the computer monitors, even the old coffee maker humming in the corner, everywhere, and always repeating. Always someone calling, always someone asking, always someone lost. And then a single word broke through, clear and chilling. Look. It wasn't spoken over the radio. Not exactly. Not audible to anyone else, if there had been anyone else. But I heard it, somewhere in the room, or maybe inside my own head. I couldn't tell the difference. My hand shook as I reached toward the screens, the recordings, the speakers. I wanted to see. I needed to see. I played back the most recent recording again. Officer Daniels. Also dead. He called in about a car accident on a rainy night. My voice replying on the recording. Except this time, the footage, no, not footage, audio only. And yet, I could feel the presence beside me. The weight of someone sitting silently in the passenger seat, waiting, listening, watching, like the storm on Highway 37, only worse. The layering voices grew faster, overlapping, names, locations, times. Calls from the living, calls from the dead, calls from the ones I could almost remember but had long forgotten. They were all there, and they all sounded wrong. Not wrong in what they said, but wrong in how they said it. Too flat, too still, like recordings played back through water. And then unmistakable, my own voice again, not just repeating words, but answering questions I hadn't asked yet, giving directions I hadn't given. And beneath it, her voice, the girl from the passenger seat, whispering in that same wind through leaves tone. Drive. I pressed my hands to my ears. I screamed, but it didn't stop. The room shook, or maybe I was shaking. My knees buckled, and for a moment, the screen flickered and went black. Then back on. The chatter continued. Names, calls, my voice, her whispers, the voices of officers long gone. I can't explain how I knew it, but I did. The glitch wasn't a glitch. The radios weren't broken. Something else was here. Something that had learned to mimic, to call, to haunt. Something that pressed the past into the present until it felt alive again. And it wanted me to hear it, to respond, to be trapped in the same loop. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run, slam the doors, never look back. But even as I stood, every instinct screaming at me to escape, the whispers followed. Names I recognized from old case files, names of the ones who had vanished, names of the dead. And always, threaded through it all, that single command. Drive. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had no meaning. My mind ached and the lights flickered, casting shadows that moved against the walls like they had minds of their own. I could almost see shapes in the dark. Faces. Officers I knew, officers I didn't. And in every face, the same eyes, empty, pleading, accusing, watching me, judging me, waiting for something I didn't understand. Finally, silence fell. The monitors went dark. The radios were quiet. And I sat there, chest heaving, hands shaking, staring at the empty screens. I told myself it was over. I told myself it was just a malfunction, a hallucination, a trick of exhaustion and bad wiring. I wanted to believe that. God, I wanted to believe that. But deep down, I knew better. The weight in the room hadn't lifted. It was only hiding, waiting for the next signal, the next storm, the next officer alone in the night. And I knew that whatever had spoken through those radios, whatever had twisted the past into the present, wasn't done with me. I still hear it sometimes, even now, when the wind rattles the eaves, when the hum of electronics fills a silent room, when I'm alone, a familiar voice repeating an old call, my own voice distorted, answering questions I haven't asked. And beneath it all, her voice, soft, insistent, and impossibly close. Drive. And I think, not for the first time, not for the last, that someday I will. I will follow, I will obey, and I will disappear into the static, into the calls that never end, into the echoing voices of the dead and the lost. And no one will remember me, except in whispers and glitches that layer over the next call, waiting for someone else to hear, someone else to answer. I shouldn't have come back. I knew that the moment my boots hit the cold asphalt of Highway 37, the same road I thought I had left behind, the same stretch of blacktop and trees that had haunted me for years, rain-slicked, empty, endless, I could feel it in my chest, the familiar weight, like the storm had folded itself into my ribs, pressing me down before I even stepped into the night. I drove slowly, headlights cutting through the mist. Every mile felt heavier than the last, as though the road itself remembered me. And maybe it did, because when I passed the bend where it had all begun, where I had first seen the stalled car, the passenger, the impossible, I realized I had been here before, over and over. And each time, I thought was new. Each time, I thought I was alone. The patrol car idled beside the shoulder as it always had, though somehow it felt older, rusted in the dim light of the street lamp above. My hand shook on the wheel, gripping the steering wheel like it might anchor me, might keep me from being swallowed by whatever loop I had walked into. And then I saw it, the report. I wasn't ready to read it, but my eyes were drawn to the paper pinned under the windshield wiper. A faded sheet, edges curling from rain. The ink smudged but legible. My name was on it, my own name, typed in the official block letters of the sheriff's department. Officer, me. Date, decades ago. Location, Highway 37. Incident, single vehicle crash, unknown passenger. I blinked, then blinked again. Time folded over itself in that instant, and I could feel it. The pull, the gravity of years compressed into one unbearable moment. I was reading a report of myself responding to crash. Myself. And somehow, I had already done this. Already been here. Already been me. I climbed out of the car. The rain wetted my coat almost instantly. The smell of wet asphalt and old leaves filled my nostrils, grounded me just enough to remind me that I was still human. But the report trembled in my hand. My hand, not just trembling, but shaking like it carried decades of memories it had never processed. I unfolded the paper fully, reading line after line. Every detail matched what I remember from the first time, or the 100th time. Stalled vehicle, passenger seat empty, calls to dispatch, my own voice on the radio. And yet this time, the date should have been impossible. The world seemed to tilt. I could hear it, static in the distance, faint at first, like a radio picking up a ghost signal. Then the voices came. Names I had heard, names I had answered for, names I had never wanted to hear again. And each one was tied to that crash, to that night, to me, calling out, repeating, layering themselves over the rain, over the road, over my memory. I stumbled back toward the car, the paper still clutched in my hand, and that's when I saw her. The girl, the one from the passenger seat, her hair plastered to her face, her eyes wide, unblinking, fixed on me. She didn't move. She didn't speak. But I could feel her presence, like the storm had wrapped itself around her body and pressed her into mine. And the worst part, she was waiting. Not for me, not for the first time. Waiting for this exact moment. Waiting for me to see my own name on that report. I wanted to run. I wanted to tear the paper and throw it into the rain. To drive away and pretend this loop didn't exist. But my legs refused. Something deep inside me knew the truth. Knew that if I tried to leave, if I tried to escape, the loop would just reset again. And maybe if I ran too far, I'd never find my way back. Or maybe I'd find my way back anyway, forced to relive it forever. I stepped closer to the patrol car. The headlights flickered in the mist. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but it didn't feel lighter. The road felt alive, breathing under my feet. My reflection in the side mirror looked wrong. Older, younger, blurred, shifting. I pressed my palm against the glass, and for a second, I could swear I felt it pulse. A heartbeat, slow and deliberate, matching the rhythm of my own. The report slipped from my fingers and landed on the asphalt. I leaned down, picked it up, and that's when I heard it. My own voice, low, coming from the radio in the patrol car. Unit, check on the vehicle. Highway 37. The words were identical to the ones I had spoken years ago, or decades ago, or maybe just moments ago. I couldn't tell anymore. Time didn't move forward here. It moved in circles, spirals, loops that tightened around me until I felt I could barely breathe. I opened the door to the patrol car. The interior was damp, the smell of wet leather and rust filling my nostrils. And there she was, seated in the passenger seat, calm, silent, unblinking, waiting. Not the child I remember exactly, but something older, something aware. She smiled just slightly, that same smile that had made my stomach twist the first time I saw her. I swallowed hard. My voice trembled. Why are you here? No answer. Only the sound of rain, the faint hum of the radio, and then the whisper, her voice. Soft, wind-like, brushing against the inside of my skull. Drive? I wanted to protest. I wanted to scream, to throw open the door, to run into the night and leave this loop behind. But I couldn't. I knew I never could. The world beyond this stretch of asphalt didn't exist. Not really. Only the road, the rain, the crash, and her. And me. Me. I slid into the driver's seat, hands trembling, and started the engine. The headlights cut through the mist, illuminating the same bend, the same trees, the same stretch of road I had driven so many times before. And as I rolled forward, I could feel it. Every call I'd ever answered, every officer who had vanished, every report I had filed or read, folded into this moment. Everything led back to me, and I realized it had always been me. The reports, the radios, the passengers, the voices. They weren't random. They were my life, my curse, my punishment. Every loop, every call, every crash, every report mine. I had been responding to the same crash for decades, and I hadn't even known it. Not fully. Not until now. The rain began again, light at first, then heavier, as if the storm had been waiting for me to understand. The radio crackled, voices overlapping. Old officers, dead ones, missing ones, calling out, echoing, layering on top of each other. And through it all, the whisper, drive? I gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles white. I thought I could resist, thought I could turn the car around and break the cycle. But the road wouldn't allow it. The trees leaned closer. The asphalt stretched endlessly ahead. The crash awaited. And somehow, somewhere deep inside, I understood that I wasn't just responding. I was part of it. Always had been. Always would be. The patrol car moved forward. Tires slicing through rainwater. The bend approached. I could see the glint of metal, the reflection of headlights that weren't mine. The passenger seat beside me held her, silent, watching, waiting. And as I reached the spot where the vehicle would appear, I realized something horrifyingly simple. This was the first time I had driven this road. It wasn't even the 100. It had no end. The report in my hand crumpled as I gripped the wheel, pressed my foot down, and the world tilted again. The sounds of past calls flooded in, voices, names, dates, collisions. I recognized them all. Every missing officer, every stalled car, every strange passenger. And they're written in ink on paper that had been pinned to a patrol car for decades. My name, me, the one who always answered, the one who always returned, the one who would never leave. I wanted to close my eyes, to wake up somewhere else, anywhere else. But I couldn't, because the road was real. And the passenger, she was real. And the crash, inevitable, eternal, waited. And the final replay had begun. And even now, as I drive into the storm, into the bend, into the inevitable, I know one thing. This time, there is no one to call in, no dispatch to answer, no reports to file. Only me, only the road, only her, and only the loop that will never end. I will answer the call, always. I started at the morgue in the middle of winter, when the air itself seemed to shiver, and I quickly learned that working with the dead doesn't make you numb. It makes you notice everything. The subtle shifts in temperature, the faint odors that linger longer than they should, the silence that isn't silent. I like to think I was ready. I wasn't. From the first day, drawer 12 stood out, not because it was labeled or hidden. Every drawer is labeled, but because it felt different, always colder than the rest. A few degrees, just enough to make the tips of my fingers tingle when I brushed against it. At first, I chalked it up to faulty refrigeration. Morgue units aren't perfect, but it wasn't the machine. I checked it, every setting, every dial. Everything was normal, yet drawer 12 stayed colder. The first time I noticed it, the drawer was empty. I remember running my hand over the smooth steel, feeling the bite of cold through the gloves. I pulled it open fully. Nothing, just a clean, sterile interior, smelling faintly of disinfectant, and something else I couldn't name. I should have closed it, walked away, and pretended I didn't feel the chill crawling up my arm. But I didn't. I couldn't. By the end of the week, I realized drawer 12 never stayed empty. Every time I returned, even if I had just checked an hour ago, it held a body. Not just any body. Something about these bodies felt wrong. Not visibly at first. No wounds, no blood, nothing that would make a medical student blink twice. But the way the bodies rested in the cold, the way the features seemed too still, too exact, it made me hesitate before lifting the sheets. One night, I arrived after the janitor had left, and the fluorescent lights flickered overhead. The hall smelled sharper in the cold, metallic, and antiseptic. Drawer 12 was closed. I could feel it before I even touched it, that deep, unnatural chill that spread from the steel to my bones. I pulled it open slowly. There, lying on the metal shelf, was a body. I didn't recognize it, and I should have, but something about it, it felt familiar, as if I had seen it before, somewhere distant, or maybe not yet. I covered my mouth with my gloved hand and stepped back. The lights flickered again, casting long shadows along the tiled floor. The body didn't move. It shouldn't have moved. But in the corner of my vision, I thought I saw the chest rise. Not breathing, at least not in a way I know, but a subtle shift, a faint twitch that made my stomach tighten. I stared, long enough to convince myself I was imagining it. I told myself exhaustion, night shifts, the cold, my own nerves. But the cold was real. And it spread, through my gloves, through my coat, deep into my chest. I began marking it in a notebook. Drawer 12, date, time, observations. Each entry became a small ritual. I couldn't explain why, but writing it down helped me feel like I had control, even if I didn't. Sometimes the bodies were fresh. Sometimes they had been there longer than they should have. Always, they were the wrong kind of still. Too perfect, too silent. And sometimes when I leaned close, I could swear I felt eyes on me. One night, I stayed late, the building empty except for me and the hum of the refrigeration units. I had left drawer 12 open while I checked supplies. I turned back to it. The body was gone. My heart lurched. I spun around the room, checking every drawer. Nothing. All the other drawers were normal. Clean, cold, but not that unnatural bite. I backed away, slowly, not turning my back. And then I heard it, a whisper, low, almost indistinct. Not through the intercom, not from events, from the drawer. Don't leave. I froze. My hands shook despite the gloves. My voice caught in my throat, and I tried to call out, tried to convince myself it was a trick. But the whisper came again, clearer. Don't leave. The lights flickered violently, and I stumbled backward. When I dared to look again, the body was back, drawer closed as if nothing had happened, the chill radiating from the steel like a living thing. My fingers brushed the handle, and I could feel it pulsing faintly, a heartbeat beneath the metal. I wanted to run, to scream, to leave and never return. But something kept me rooted. Curiosity, fear, obligation. I don't know. I opened it. The body looked the same features, the same strange familiarity. And this time, I noticed something I hadn't before. A faint smile, almost imperceptible, tugging at the corners of the lips. Not human, not normal. It wasn't there when I first looked, and yet it had always been there. I stared too long, unable to look away, until my knees buckled and I sank to the floor, breathing shallow and fast. Weeks passed. Every night, Drawer 12 called to me. Sometimes it was the bodies. Sometimes it was the whisper. Sometimes both. And always the cold. No matter how many times I adjusted the temperature, cleaned the drawer, or convinced myself it was nothing, the cold persisted. And I persisted, drawn back, night after night, even as exhaustion gnawed at my mind. One evening, I dared ask a co-worker about it. Drawer 12, I said, trying to sound casual, ever notice something strange? They laughed, a short, nervous laugh. That drawer? Everyone notices it. It's colder than the rest. Always has been. But it's just the ventilation. Nothing more. I wanted to believe them. I did. But I knew better. You don't get that kind of cold by accident. You don't feel it seep into your bones, seep into your mind, unless something is waiting. Something alive, even in the stillness. Something that refuses to stay gone. One night, I stayed until dawn. The building was silent, and the world outside began to brighten, gray light spilling through the frosted windows. I opened drawer 12 one last time before heading home. The body wasn't there. Relief washed over me, brief and shallow. I leaned down, touching the steel with my fingertips. Cold, normal cold. Maybe I was finally imagining it. Maybe the loop was broken. Maybe, then I heard it. Not a whisper this time. Not soft, not hesitant. Clear, insistent, from beneath the steel, from the place where the cold lingered, from somewhere I couldn't see. You can't leave. I stumbled back, heart hammering. My breath came fast, uneven, fogging the cold air. The cold of the drawer spread, not just through my gloves, not just through my coat, but through me into my chest, my lungs, my thoughts. And then I saw it, just a glimpse, a movement under the sheet, just a twitch, a subtle rise, a shadow sliding across the smooth metal surface. I wanted to close it. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. My hands, shaking, reached again for the handle. The drawer pulled open as if expecting me. And there it was, the body, silent, still, perfect, and that faint smile, tugging at the corners of lips that shouldn't have moved, greeted me like an old friend. I collapsed to the floor, heart pounding, staring at the impossibility. And I understood something then, a realization that clawed its way into my mind. Drawer 12 never stays empty, because it never wants to. It never will. And I had always been its witness. Always. Even now, months later, I can feel it calling me sometimes. Not with words, not with motion, but with that cold, that impossible, unnatural cold. A presence that waits just beyond perception, just beyond reason, waiting for the next shift, the next night, the next moment when someone thinks they can leave, someone who thinks they can walk away. I haven't. I don't know if I ever will. I didn't notice it at first. Not right away. The morgue is full of little oddities if you pay attention, and I've been paying attention for a long time. Cold steel, faint smells, the quiet hum of refrigeration units, the way shadows stretch and twist along the tile walls when the fluorescent lights flicker, just so. It's in that quiet that the weirdness usually creeps up on you, slow and patient. The first tag appeared on a body schedule for cremation. I saw it while pulling the drawer open to check the paperwork. The handwriting looked familiar, too familiar. It was neat, careful, almost obsessive in its curves and loops. My handwriting, my own. I froze, gloved fingers hovering over the tag, feeling the cold steel of the drawer beneath them. I laughed at myself quietly, just a short, nervous chuckle. I must have written it. I must have. I couldn't have imagined it. I checked my notes, my forms, my own handwriting samples. Nothing matched exactly, but it was close enough to make me swallow hard and back away. By the second tag, I knew it was an accident. The same neat loops, the same pressure pen against paper, appeared on another body. Different day, different shift, same handwriting. My handwriting. And my stomach dropped because I hadn't been here to tag them. Not that day, not ever. I tried to explain it, rationalize it. Maybe someone was copying my style, some prank, some kind of mistake. But that didn't explain the third body. Tag at dawn just hours before I arrived. Or the fourth, waiting silently in drawer 12. The one I'd learned never stays empty. Each one bore my name, my signature, my own twisted script, written across the tag like a calling card I never sent. I began checking the logs, tracing every name, every cremation request, every shift schedule. Nothing made sense. I had never touched these bodies. I had never signed the forms. But there was proof staring back at me. Black ink on white paper, my own handwriting repeating over and over like a loop I couldn't break. I started losing sleep. Nights at home became exercises in staring at walls. Counting the seconds until morning, afraid of what I might see if I closed my eyes. And the morgue. The morgue called me back. Drawer 12, the old cold ones, the refrigeration hums. They whispered for me to check, to look, to see. And each time, another body had a tag with my writing, my signature, my own voice written in ink on the fate of the dead. The first time I touched one of the tags after noticing it, my hand froze. The cold metal beneath the paper felt like it was drawing warmth out of my body. A pulse, faint, almost alive, like the body itself was aware of the words I hadn't written. My fingers trembled, hovering over the paper. I wanted to throw it away, tear it up, burn it myself, but the thought of touching it, even to destroy it, made the chill spread deeper, past my gloves, past my skin, into my chest. I began documenting each tag, carefully, obsessively. Dates, times, drawer numbers, notes. I wrote it all down, trying to hold on to sanity by noting facts, keeping a ledger of the impossible. The handwriting never wavered, never changed. My name, my loops, my curves, always neat, always precise, always there. Then I started noticing details I hadn't before. The tags weren't just written in my style. They carried something of me, a rhythm, a pattern I recognized from years of journaling, of signing forms, of writing notes to myself. Every slant, every cross, every even I echoed habits I didn't consciously remember performing, as if some part of me had written them, even when I hadn't. I tried leaving early one night, hoping the cold and the tags would wait for me to return, but it didn't work. Drawer 12 was already open when I arrived, another tag resting neatly on the body inside. And I knew it. I knew that even if I walked away, even if I ran, I was tethered here, tied to this cycle. The morgue, the bodies, the tags, they belonged to me, or maybe I belonged to them. I started hearing things, not voices exactly, but the faint scratch of pen against paper in empty rooms. Sometimes I would swear I saw the tip of a pen moving across the tags when no one was there. My eyes would widen, heart hammering, only to find the paper untouched, ink dry, and the cold seeping from the drawer like it was breathing. One night, the whisper came, low, insistent. Right. I jolted, hand clutching the railing near the drawers, staring at the empty floor. No one was there. No one ever is when this happens. But I could feel it. The presence of something pressing against my spine, warm and patient, demanding, familiar. I tried to shake it off, tried to tell myself exhaustion, paranoia, stress. But exhaustion doesn't make your own handwriting appear on tags you didn't touch. Stress doesn't make the dead wait for you to return, or the cold follow you like a shadow that lives inside your chest. The whisper came again, closer this time, as if standing just behind me, brushing against my shoulder. Right. I wanted to run, to escape, but my legs refused. My hands went to my face, then fell to the tags. Each one looked up at me, neat ink, familiar loops, my name on them. And then I realized it wasn't just a signature. It was a message, not consciously written, but a message nonetheless. A declaration, a tether. The dead weren't just tagged. They were calling me, waiting for me to respond, waiting for me to write. I began dreaming about the tags, not just seeing them, but feeling them sliding under my fingers, the cold biting through my gloves and skin, the ink sticky and alive, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. I would wake drenched in sweat, sheets clinging to my chest, only to find the cold lingering on my fingertips, a reminder that sleep doesn't protect you. The morgue doesn't wait. Drawer 12 doesn't wait. The tags don't wait. One morning, I found 3 tags stacked on the counter, all fresh, all mine. The bodies were scheduled for cremation later that day, but I hadn't touched them, not even once. I stared at the handwriting, feeling bile rise in my throat. I tried rational explanations, staff errors, mistakes, hoaxes, but each tag was perfect, too perfect, not human, not something any of the living could produce in that way. I reached out slowly, gloved fingers brushing over the ink. It burned lightly, a prickling heat that crawled up my arm, then vanished as quickly as it appeared. And in that moment, I understood they were mine. The tags, the handwriting, the bodies, they belonged to me, and I belonged to them. Not in life, not in death, somewhere in between. From that day, I stopped leaving the morgue empty-handed. Every tag I touched, every body I processed, every signature I reluctantly traced became part of the pattern. Drawer 12 stayed colder than the rest, always, as if drawing life from somewhere unseen. And every time I wrote, my own name, my own loops, my own curves appeared on new tags, even when my hand had not moved. I don't know how long this has been happening. Days, weeks, months. I've stopped counting. Time doesn't flow normally here. The morgue has its own rhythm, its own pulse, and drawer 12 beats with it. Every body, every tag, every signature, repeating endlessly. A record I cannot erase, a loop I cannot break. Sometimes, when the building is empty, I swear I can hear the faint scratch of a pen moving across the tags, even when I'm not near them. Sometimes, I swear I can see the words forming themselves in ink before my eyes, my own handwriting, looping endlessly across the paper. Declare my presence, my tether, my fate. I try to leave. I really do. I step out of the morgue at night, into the empty streets, into the cold air that doesn't bite the same way as drawer 12. But it doesn't matter. The handwriting follows me. My name follows me. The whisper follows me. And I know, with a certainty that chills my bones deeper than any refrigeration unit ever could, that I will return. I will always return. The dead are patient. Drawer 12 is patient. The tags, the writing, the cold, they wait for me to return. And I always do. The blackout hit just as I was finishing my shift. 1 second the lights were humming their usual stereo song, and the next, nothing. Darkness swallowed the morgue, thick and complete, leaving me alone with the hum of the refrigeration units and my own shallow breathing. My flashlight didn't reach far, just a cone of yellow against the endless black. I should have left. I knew I should have. But drawer 12, I couldn't. Not this time. Not when the cold from that drawer seemed sharper than ever, almost like it was waiting for me, calling me closer. I remember gripping the flashlight tighter, my knuckles white, the smell of disinfectant sharper in the black. The air felt heavier, and the darkness was cold in a way that wasn't just absence of light. It was alive, pressing against my skin. I walked slowly, every step echoing off the tile, careful not to make a sound I couldn't control. Drawer 12 loomed at the end of the row, its steel surface darker in the shadows. I could feel the chill radiating from it, creeping along the floor and up my legs, curling around my spine like icy fingers. I tried to breathe evenly, tried to tell myself it was just a cold, just a blackout, just me imagining things. But I knew better. I reached out, hand trembling, and pressed my palm against the handle. It was colder than ever, biting through my glove, sinking into my skin. I hesitated, heart hammering. I told myself to step back, to leave, to wait for the lights to return. But some part of me, curiosity, fear, obsession, guilt, wouldn't let me. I pulled the drawer open. The cold hit me first. A wall of frost and metal, sharper than anything I had felt before, sliding into my lungs and settling in my chest. And then I heard it, a whisper, not just one whisper. Hundreds, layered, overlapping, drowning the silence of blackout. My own name, repeated over and over, faint at first, almost indistinct. James, James, James. I froze, every hair on my arm standing on end. My flashlight trembled in my hand, the beam quivering as it fell across the drawer. I wanted to close it. I wanted to run. But my feet were rooted. My heart was hammering so hard, I thought it might burst from my chest. And the whispers kept coming, louder, sharper, clearer. James, James, James. I looked closer. The bodies inside the drawer weren't ordinary. They were like they were watching me. Not with open eyes closed, features still, but somehow aware, somehow conscious. I could feel their attention on me, their presence crawling over my skin. I could feel the cold emanating from their still flesh, a cold that was alive, moving, pressing into me like water. I leaned closer, breath fogging in the frigid air, and realized that the whispers weren't just coming from the drawer. They were inside my head, pressing into my thoughts, repeating my name layer upon layer. My own name, spoken by voices I should never hear again. Dead voices, silent bodies, whispering, calling. I stumbled backward, fumbling for the flashlight, trying to make sense of it. Why? I croaked, voice shaking. The whisper answered, but not in words I could recognize. Not a language, not a sentence. Just my name, drawn out, stretched, echoing in my skull like it had been there all along. James, James, James. I wanted to cover my ears, to escape, but the cold followed me wherever I moved. It crept into my sleeves, my coat, my gloves, past my skin, into my chest, until I felt like I was suffocating in ice. The drawer loomed before me, metallic and alive, and I knew that I could not leave. I could not turn away. The voices began to layer themselves, overlapping in rhythm with my own heartbeat. Faster, slower, then faster again. Each whisper was a memory I couldn't place, a fragment of a shift long past, a name I had signed on a tag, a body I had lifted, a cold that had never left me. They were all here, all calling me, all waiting. And in the corner of my vision, I thought I saw a movement beneath the sheets, a flicker of something shifting, something alive. I fell to my knees. My hands shook, trembling against the floor, and I realized I was whispering too, my own name, repeating without thought. I tried to stop, tried to command myself to breathe, but the cold had a voice now, guiding me, pressing me, pushing me. James, right? James. I shook my head, trying to make it stop. The flashlight fell from my hands, rolling across the tile, casting erratic shadows that danced across the steel. The body shifted slightly, almost imperceptibly, but enough for me to see the curves of shoulders, the faint rise and fall, the suggestion of movement beneath the sheets. My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe, not because of fear alone, but because the cold had invaded me entirely, freezing my lungs, my ribs, my thoughts. I tried to crawl away, desperate, clinging to anything that might anchor me to reality. But the whispers followed, louder now, overlapping, unstoppable. Names, dates, times, calls I had answered long ago, My own handwriting echoing in my mind, repeated in the cold. They were reminding me of everything I had seen, everything I had done, everything I had touched. And then, clearer than ever, one body, one face, opened its eyes. Just a flicker, just for a second. I saw her, the girl, not fully formed, not alive in any ordinary sense, but aware, waiting, watching. The whisper of her voice joined the others, delicate, urgent, insistent. James? James. I screamed a ragged, broken sound and pressed my hands to my ears. It didn't matter. The cold was inside me now. Inside my chest, my stomach, my skull. Every part of me that had lived in warmth, in light, in day, had been claimed. Drawer 12 was alive. The bodies were alive. And their whispers, their voices, they were mine to answer. I can't tell you how long I stayed there. Minutes, hours, days, I don't know. Time doesn't move in the darkness. Only the cold moves. Only the whispers move. Only the presence waits. I tried to stand. I tried to leave. But the drawer wouldn't let me. The bodies would not allow it. And every whisper, every repetition of my name, pressed into me, demanded I listen. I began to hear things in the voices I hadn't before. Fragments of sentences, memories of shifts I had worked, names I had signed on tags, bodies I had lifted. The dead were reminding me, teaching me, holding me accountable for every moment I thought I was alone, every time I thought I had left them behind. They were patient, eternal, and waiting for me to notice, waiting for me to remember. I tried speaking, my own voice shaky, trembling. I'm here. I hear you. The whisper responded, layered, impossible, omnipresent. James, always here, always yours. And then the cold hit me fully. Not the kind of cold you can shake off with a jacket. Not the kind that leaves frost on the glass. The cold of drawer 12 filled me entirely, as if I had been poured into it, as if my body was nothing more than water freezing into steel. My thoughts slowed, my vision blurred, my breath labored. And still, the whispers continued, louder now, insistent, repeating, overlapping. I realized then what the cold had always been. Not a temperature, not a malfunction, not even a warning. It was a voice. It was consciousness. It was the way the dead kept talking when no one else would listen. And drawer 12 was the vessel for memory, for echoes, for names that needed to be spoken, for a presence that demanded attention. I don't remember leaving the morgue that night. I don't remember the lights coming back on. All I remember is the cold and the whispers and the feeling of being held, trapped, tethered to the drawer, to the bodies, to the voices. My own name repeated endlessly, over and over, as if every syllable was a heartbeat in the chest of the dead. And even now, days later, I can feel it. In my chest, in my head, in the hollow spaces where warmth should be. The cold follows me, quiet at first, then louder when I am alone. Drawer 12 waits for me. The bodies wait. The whispers wait. And my name will always be theirs. I know I will return. I have to. I have no choice. The cold keeps them talking, and I'm the one who must listen. Always. I always knew something was off about him the moment he walked through the diner door. Not the trucker himself, not at first. Just the way the clock read 2:07 a.m. every single night, like clockwork. Not 2:05, not 2:10. Exactly 2:07. I've been working nights for years, and I can tell you, consistency like that in the middle of a shift, especially this hour, isn't natural. It's precise. It's deliberate. He was always the same. Same trucker hat. Same denim jacket. Same scuff boots that made that soft tap-tap across the linoleum floor. Same gloves. Even the smell, diesel and old leather, sharp and cold. Clinging to him like a shadow. I'd see him take the same seat every night. Corner booth by the window, and I'd freeze. Not because he looked threatening, but because the moment I noticed him, everything felt wrong. Like the diner itself held its breath. I'd bring him coffee, black, just like he liked it. Sometimes I'd bring a slice of pie on the house. He never said thank you, not in the usual way. His lips would curl slightly, almost like a smile, but it never reached his eyes. His eyes were dark, deep, unreadable, like he could see me, like he could see all of us, behind the walls, behind the linoleum, into the cold corners of the world where we pretended no one was watching. I tried to chalk it up to loneliness. Weird hours, weird people. But that timing was impossible. I asked the cook once if he'd seen the trucker at different hours. He laughed. "Kid, I've been cooking here for 20 years. If he's coming, I see him. And it's always 2:07. Always." That shook me more than anything. Because no one keeps track of minutes like that unless it matters. And I could feel it mattered. The diner felt different when he sat there. The air felt thicker. The lights above hummed differently. Even the neon sign outside seemed to flicker in a rhythm that matched the way my stomach twisted. Some nights, I'd catch him staring at the window, not looking out, but through, like he was waiting for something or someone. Sometimes I'd glance at the parking lot, thinking maybe his rig was parked, engine idling, lights off. But nothing was ever there. The lot was empty, completely empty, except for him. And then there were the conversations. He never spoke more than a few words, usually monosyllables, just enough to confirm his order or comment on the weather. But the tone carried something, a subtle weight, a kind of suggestion, like he was putting thoughts into my head without opening his mouth. I could feel my pulse quicken, my thoughts slowed down, just enough for me to notice how strange it all was, how precise, how wrong. One night, I asked him, curiosity finally getting the better of me, "Why 2:07? He looked at me, dark eyes scanning my face, and then he smiled, just slightly, a twitch of lips, and he said, "It's important." That was it, nothing more. And yet, the words echoed in my mind long after he left. Important for whom? For him? For me? For someone I'd never seen? And why was I already afraid before I even understood what I should be afraid of? After that night, I started paying attention, not just to the clock, but to everything. How the diner smelled when he arrived, how the hum of the fridge grew louder, how the coffee machine seemed to sputter differently, how shadows bent toward his booth and lingered longer than they should. I'd tell myself I was imagining things, that the late hours and the empty streets had finally gotten to me. But the diner doesn't lie. It tells you the truth if you're willing to listen. And it was screaming. Sometimes, I'd see movement behind him in the booth's reflection in the window. Not mine, not the cook's, just something flickering in the corner of the glass. I'd spin around, but the diner was empty. No one. Just me, just the clock ticking closer to 2:07. And then the door would open, and there he'd be, stepping in at that exact moment. Boots soft on the floor, hat low, hands gloved, presence stretching into every corner of the room. I started noticing the pattern outside, too. Cars that would pass by and stop, engines idling at the edge of the lot, only to vanish as soon as he entered. Shadows that shouldn't have moved the way they did. Even the moon seemed to watch him differently. Silver light striking the floor at odd angles when he sat. I knew it wasn't normal, and I knew it wasn't coincidence. I tried ignoring it, tried to act like another night, another customer, another shift, but it became impossible. The fear wasn't the kind that makes you run. It was slow, creeping, a realization that something about this man, this exact minute, this presence was not meant to be understood by anyone alive. He carried a weight with him, a timing, a purpose, and I could feel it pressing on me the second he crossed the threshold. One night, I stayed behind after he left. Cleaned tables, wiped counters, tried to make sense of the unease that had been growing inside me like ice. And that's when I saw it. The reflection, not his reflection in the window, but something moving behind it. A figure, just barely visible, standing outside the lot, staring at the diner, watching the clock, waiting for the exact moment. I blinked. It vanished. But the unease didn't. It had settled into my bones. I started keeping a notebook. Times, descriptions, odd occurrences. Every night, I would jot down exactly when he arrived, what he ordered, the way the air changed, the temperature of the diner, how the shadows fell, By the end of a week, the pages were filled with scribbles I could barely read. And yet, I could see a pattern forming. Not just in the trucker, but in myself. My heartbeat, my nerves, the diner itself. And then the dream started. Always the same. Empty streets, neon flickering. The sound of distant engines. The smell of diesel and wet asphalt. A lone figure moving in the darkness. Always arriving at 2:07. Always the same posture. Same hat. Same gloves. And I would watch him, knowing somehow that he was not just a man, not just a trucker, not just a customer, but something else, something older, waiting, measuring, choosing. One night, I finally asked him again, "Who are you waiting for?" He paused. The clock on the wall read 2:07. My hand froze on the counter. He looked at me and whispered low, deliberate, like he was placing words directly into my chest. "I've been waiting for you." I felt it then. That cold, the one that isn't from the air or the floor, but something else. Something in him. Something that had nothing to do with warmth or logic. My stomach twisted. My hands shook. I wanted to run, to hide, to pretend I had never noticed the exactness, the timing, the presence. But I couldn't, because I understood, in a way I hadn't before, that I had always been part of it. Always meant to be here, at this diner, at this hour, watching, waiting, feeling the air bend the moment he stepped inside. The diner felt smaller then, tighter, as if walls were closing in. The neon outside buzzed and flickered. Every reflection, every shadow, every sound was amplified. And I realized I wasn't alone, not in the diner, not in the dreams, not in the quiet moments before he walked in. He had been counting, marking time, aligning everything perfectly, until the exact second he entered and everything shifted. And I could feel it, my pulse, my breath, my awareness, snapping into the same rhythm. I've worked nights for years, hundreds of them, thousands of customers, but he isn't like the others. Not a man, not even entirely human. If you ask me now, the timing, the precision, the way the diner itself seemed to respond to him, it's as if he carries the world with him in that booth, the way of some impossibly old clock, measuring seconds that aren't ours, measuring people we barely notice, waiting for someone to notice him. And I notice, every night, I can feel in the air even before the door opens, the cold press of diesel, the weight of gloves, the tap-tap of boots. 2:07, always 2:07. My hands shake as I pour the coffee. The pie slice sits untouched, though I offer anyway. I try to smile, to be casual, but my chest tightens, my eyes dart the clock, to the door, to the empty street outside, knowing that he's coming. That it isn't just a customer. It's the rhythm, the timing, the pull of something older than me, something that has waited for me night after night. For years, I can't remember counting. Some nights, I swear the diner itself holds its breath, as if it knows. And when he walks in, when the door swings open and the cold wind follows him inside, I know he's here. I'm here. We're both here. The clock is here. And nothing else matters. I don't know why he waits. I don't know why it's always me. But I know that if I leave, if I step outside before 2:07, the air will feel wrong. The diner will hum. The shadows will stretch too long. And when the clock strikes 2:07, he will still be here. Always. Waiting. Watching. And somehow, he has been waiting for me. He came in just as the storm was picking up. Rain so heavy it sounded like someone was beating on the roof of my cruiser with fists of ice. Street lights blurred into streaks. Headlights reflecting off puddles that had turned the highway into a mirror. I remember gripping the wheel tighter, the hum of the tires on wet asphalt matching the thrum of my chest. This was the kind of night you notice everything. The cold, the dark, the silence between the cracks of thunder. Dispatch said it was a stalled car. Simple, routine, nothing unusual. But the voice on the radio carried that hesitance you can't ignore. Highway 37, mile marker 21. Possible stranded vehicle. Units respond. That's all. No panic. Just a suggestion of something beneath the surface. I drove slow. Rain plastered my hair, seeped under my collar, and the wipers couldn't keep up. Every shadow along the road seemed heavier than it should be, stretched by the storm, by my nerves, by something I couldn't name. The highway was empty, always empty, but tonight it felt lonelier, like the kind of loneliness that presses in from all sides and whispers. I spotted a car just past the next curve. Headlights off, hazard lights blinking weakly, like a slow heartbeat in the dark. I pulled over, tires crunching on wet gravel, and felt that familiar tension rise, the one that makes every sense sharpen at once. The smell of rain, gasoline, and something faintly metallic hung in the air. My hand hovered over the door handle before I opened it. No one was inside, not at first glance. Just the driver's seat empty, wet footprints on the floor mat, windshield streaked with rain like smeared tears. I circled the vehicle, flashlight cutting through the sheets of rain. That's when I saw him, or thought I did. A figure, standing just off the shoulder of the highway, barely visible through the downpour. Tall, hunched slightly, coat soaked, face hidden under a soaked hat. He didn't move like a normal person. Slow, deliberate, watching. "Hello?" My voice sounded hollow against the roar of the storm. No answer. Only the rain. Only the figure. I took a step closer. My boot sank slightly in the mud at the roadside. Something about him made the air feel heavier, thicker, like the storm itself was holding its breath. I remember my radio crackling. Unit 37, status? Dispatch. My voice came back clipped. Force casual. Vehicles here. Empty. I'm checking the area. Pause. Oh, there's someone outside. Not responding. The figure didn't move. Not a shift. Not a twitch. Not a glance toward me. Just waiting. Watching. My chest tightened. I wanted to call backup. To keep my distance. To retreat. But my feet carried me forward anyway. Boots slipping the mud. Flashlight beam bouncing across soaked asphalt and darkened trees. I stopped a few yards away. The figure's head tilted slightly, as if acknowledging me, though I couldn't see the eyes. I blinked, rain stinging my eyelashes, and in that moment, everything felt wrong. Not the usual wrong you feel when someone is strange or angry, but a wrong that settled in your bones, in your mind, like looking at something you were never meant to see. I stepped closer, and the storm seemed to hush just for a moment. Thunder rolled in the distance, but the space between us carried its own sound, an emptiness vibrating, almost alive. Then I noticed the car door was ajar, the driver's seat wet from rain that had seeped inside, a notebook on the passenger seat, pages fluttering in the wind. I shined the flashlight inside. The notebook wasn't mine. At least, I thought it wasn't. Something moved. A hand? A shadow? My stomach flipped. I raised the flashlight higher, rain blurring the edges, and the figure had vanished. Just gone. No footprints leading away. Nothing disturbed in the mud. Nothing except the rain washing over everything. My pulse jumped, my grip on the flashlight tightening until my knuckles whitened. I checked the car again. Keys in the ignition. Engine cold. No sign of the driver. The notebook pages stopped fluttering, as if the storm itself had noticed me. And then I saw it. A single small, wet footprint on the gravel beside the door. Not fresh. Not old. Just there. Perfectly shaped. Impossibly small. Like someone had walked right out of rain and disappeared. Dispatch, I need. My radio sputtered, cutting me off mid-sentence. Static hissed in my ears. Then silence. Just the rain. Just the wind. Just the empty stretch of highway. I felt my breath catch in my chest. My pulse hammered. But something deeper than fear gripped me. Curiosity. Obligation. Maybe foolishness. I circled the car again. Flashlight cutting lines through sheets of rain. Searching the roadside, the ditch, the trees. Nothing. Only the storm. Only the shadows stretching unnaturally in the headlights of my cruiser. And then I saw it. Something on the asphalt ahead. A jacket. Wet mud streak, no one inside it. As if it had been laid down. Not hung, not draped, not placed casually, just laid. I knelt, rain dripping down my neck. Fingers brushing the soaked fabric. There was something in the pocket. A photo? A note? My heart thumped so loud, I thought the rain would drown it out. I pulled it out. A single sheet of paper, soaked and streaked, but legible. My handwriting. My own. I froze. The rain pounded. The thunder shook the sky. The storm whipped around me, but I couldn't move. My own handwriting here, in the middle of nowhere in a storm, tied to a car, a figure I couldn't see, a footprint that didn't belong to any human I knew. My brain screamed for sense, for explanation, for reason. There was none. None at all. Footsteps, just behind me, slow, deliberate, on the gravel. I whipped around, flashlight trembling, and there was nothing. Only the trees, slick and swaying. Only the rain, washing everything in silver streaks. My pulse thundered in my ears. But I knew the footsteps weren't in the rain. They were in the air around me, pressing on my chest. Waiting. I backed toward my cruiser. Rain soaked me to the bone, boots caked with mud, hands trembling on the wheel. I started the engine, lights cutting across the darkened highway, and for a moment, the figure appeared, just a glimpse in the rear-view mirror. Tall, still, watching, hat low, gloves dark, eyes I couldn't see, and then gone. The radio buzzed back to life. Dispatch, Unit 37, status? Negative. There's nothing. My voice cracked. My heart pounded. The storm roared, relentless, mocking. I'm heading back. The drive back was slow. Every shadow along the highway seemed to twitch. Every puddle reflected more than light. I kept glancing in the mirrors, waiting, expecting, fearing. Nothing. And yet I could feel it. That presence. Watching. Waiting. The storm's rain drumming on the roof. The wipers swishing back and forth. My pulse matching the rhythm of something else. I returned to the station. Wet, shivering, mud-caked, and I couldn't explain it. The car. The footprint. The notebook. The figure that vanished into the storm. Dispatch just asked if everything was okay. I lied. Yes. Vehicle was empty. False alarm. Back at my office. I couldn't stop thinking about the handwriting. My handwriting. On a note I hadn't written. The figure on the roadside. The footprint that led nowhere. The car. The storm. The exact moment. Everything lined up like pieces in a puzzle I couldn't see. And I knew, deep in my chest, that I hadn't seen the last of him. That this night, this storm, was only the beginning. Every storm, every rain-soaked night since. I find myself scanning the dark roads, gripping the wheel tighter, heart hammering like that night. The memory of wet asphalt, cold steel, the smell of rain and metal, the footprints, the notebook. It stays with me. I see him in the corner of my eyes, half in shadow, half in imagination. I feel the presence behind me, always, pressing closer when the rain falls, whispering with the wind. I don't know who he is. I don't know why he appears at that exact moment, under that exact storm, waiting, but I know I'll never forget the sound of the rain on Highway 37. I'll never forget the way the storm bends around him, and I'll never, ever forget the feeling of that figure watching me, patient, silent, waiting for the next call in the dark. Tea started with a crackle, just a little static at first, buried beneath the voice of some late-night talk show host. A man I didn't know, but whose voice somehow fit the dark hours. I was sitting at the counter, coffee cooling in front of me, lights buzzing overhead, thinking it was just interference. But it wasn't interference. It never was. I leaned closer to the radio. Channel 6. The old frequency that barely came in anymore. And there it was. His voice. Deep, calm, conversational. The kind that makes you lean in even when you don't want to. He was talking about the diner. Not in the way people talk about businesses or food. He was talking about the people. The regulars. The strangers. About what happened after they left. I remember freezing. Coffee in my hand. The steam curling up into the air. My fingers suddenly ice cold. He said it lightly, almost joking, but there was a weight behind the words I couldn't shake. Everyone who eats at the diner disappears. Within the week. I thought it was a recording. Something old. A warning from years past. But as I listened, the details were too specific. Names. Descriptions. The way he pronounced each item on the menu like he remembered every order. The time, the night, the weather. It matched. Everything I knew about the diner, about the nights I had worked, about the people who had walked in and never walked out. I dropped my coffee, not because it spilled, I caught it, but because I realized I had been hearing this all along. The radio wasn't new. The show wasn't airing today. It wasn't even on the schedule. And yet, here it was, cutting through the static, like a voice trapped in the walls and the wiring in the air. He was speaking directly to me, telling me what I had been ignoring for years. He described a man who came in at 2:07 a.m. every night. Same hat, same coat, same gloves. Details that should have been impossible to remember. And then he laughed a little too lightly and said the trick wasn't the man. The trick was the diner itself. It held something. Not just the air, not just the smell of coffee and fries, but something older, something patient, something that claimed anyone who lingered too long. I felt my pulse tighten, hands on the counter, breath shallow. I couldn't leave. Not yet. I had to listen. Every word felt like a chain tightening around me, like the radio itself was dragging me into the static, into the past, into nights I had forgotten and meals I had served. He talked about the first person he noticed, a woman who came in one quiet Thursday, notebook in hand, eyes on her phone, and left smiling. By Friday, she was gone. Not missing in the usual way, just gone, like the diner had swallowed her and spat nothing back. And then the next, and the next. Patterns, days, weeks, months, all following the same rhythm. Eating, leaving, vanishing. I tried to shake it off, to rationalize. Maybe it was a myth. Maybe an old host trying to make a story creepier than it really was. But the way he spoke, the names, the order of events, it all lined up. I remembered a man who came in for coffee last week. Stayed in the corner booth, eyes scanning the room like he could see me before I saw him. Monday he vanished. Disappeared. Just gone. And another, 2 nights later, a young couple, quiet, polite. Tuesday morning, no trace. I felt the diner tighten around me. Not physically, but in the way the air thickened. Shadows bending just a little differently. The hum of the refrigerator louder. My chest pressed, not with fear exactly, but with something heavier, something older. The radio continued, voice smooth, calm, pulling me forward into the static like it had always been waiting for me to notice. He told stories I recognized without realizing. The woman at the counter with the red scarf, the man in the denim jacket, the trucker who arrived at 2:07 every night. All of them, all gone, and I had served them. I had seen them. I had nodded at them, smiled at them, and nothing had seemed wrong until now, until I heard the voice, weaving names and dates into static, pointing out the pattern I had been blind to. I thought about the night I worked alone during the blackout. Drawer 12. The corpses whispering my name, cold pressing in. And now this, a voice from a long-forgotten frequency, telling me the truth about the people who would come in, about the diner itself, about what happened when you linger too long, when you notice too much, when you hear the wrong things. I turned the knob, tried to change the station, but it snapped back. Channel 6. Static crackling, voice smooth, patient. They come in, they eat, and the diner remembers. I swallowed hard. My tongue felt thick in my mouth. The radio whispered details I hadn't noticed. The smell of coffee stronger than usual. The hum of the fridge louder. The way the chairs seemed to shift just slightly when no one was in them. The diner had a rhythm, a pulse, a memory, and it claimed everyone who stayed in its current long enough to be noticed, long enough to be recorded, long enough to leave a trace. I leaned closer, breath fogging in the cold air of the diner. He spoke about the newest pattern, about a man tall, hat low, gloves dark, coming every night at 2:07, watching, waiting, observing, and I could feel it, that weight in the air, my own pulse matching it, my own hands trembling. The static seemed to vibrate in my chest. You notice too much, the voice said, not speaking to anyone else, not the audience he imagined. To me, only me. I could feel it pressing in, wrapping around my thoughts. The radio was not playing anymore. It was alive, a conduit, a message, a warning, or maybe a trap. I remember the notebook I'd found in the empty car on Highway 37. My handwriting, my notes, things I hadn't remembered writing, the figure outside the car. Everything lined up. The diner, the storm, the vehicles, the meals, the disappearances, the static, and now this Channel 6. Voice smooth, words precise. All of it connected. I looked at the empty booths. The chairs still wet from mop water. The counters shining under fluorescent lights. The shadows stretched across the floor. I could almost feel them moving when I wasn't looking. Waiting. Watching. Like the voice said. The diner remembers. And if you notice, if you linger, if you pay attention, it doesn't forget. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it. That it was a trick of late hours, fatigue, too many storms, too much rain, too much isolation. But I knew better. I had seen the way the air shifted, felt the weight of it pressing on me. And now the voice, old, smooth, patient, not just a recording, not just a show, a warning, a memory, a promise. I turned off the radio finally. The static cut out, leaving only the hum of the fridge, the flicker of the neon sign outside, the soft drip of a leaky pipe. But the feeling stayed, heavy in my chest, crawling down my arms, settling in my bones. The diner hadn't changed. It didn't need to. I had. I didn't sleep that night. Sat at the counter with my coffee, watching the darkened booths, counting the shadows, listening for the hum in the walls. Every footstep in the empty lot outside sounded like it belonged to someone who had been here before, or someone who would be here later. Someone the diner remembered, someone the radio remembered, someone it would claim, and I remembered all of it, every name, every order, every strange arrival, every meal, every disappearance, every pattern that should have been invisible. The diner remembered. The voice on Channel 6 remembered. And now, so did I. I still worked the late shift. Still served coffee to the empty booths. Still watched the door, listening for the sound of footsteps, the timing of arrivals, the rhythm of disappearances. I check the radio every night. Sometimes it crackles, sometimes it doesn't. But I know it's there, waiting, watching, counting. And I know that if I stay too long, notice too much, the diner will remember me too. And I fear that one night, maybe soon, I will disappear too. I always thought closing time was simple. Turn off the lights, lock the doors, slide the sign to close, and walk out. 30 years of doing it. 30 years of the same rhythm. And tonight was different. The diner was quiet, too quiet. Not just empty, though it was empty, but that hollow quiet that presses against your ears and makes you aware of your heartbeat. I moved through the rows of booths, broom in hand, flicking crumbs into the dustpan, counting steps without thinking. It had always been comforting, this routine, familiar, safe. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering just enough to keep me on edge. Shadows stretched long across the floor, distorted by the uneven tiles. I had walked past them 1,000 times, but tonight they seemed thicker, waiting, watching. I shrugged, forcing thought away. Too many late nights, too many storms, too much coffee. Nothing more. I checked the coffee machine. Off. Dishwasher? Off. Registers? Off. Cash counted, drawer locked. The ritual complete. And yet, something was off. The diner felt larger than usual, as if the walls had stretched while I wasn't looking, swallowing air around me. I could hear the hum of the fridge, but it wasn't enough. There was a subtle vibration in the floor, like the diner itself was breathing. I flipped the last light switch and stepped back. The sign on the door, now red, closed. Darkness stretched from the windows like a physical thing, thick and endless. The road outside, it didn't look like any road I'd ever driven. Not the one I had parked along when I first started. Not the one I remembered after decades of shifts. It twisted, a ribbon of black, leading nowhere, curving into mist and shadow that disappeared before I could follow with my eyes. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. 30 years. I had been here 30 years. I should know this place. Every tile, every crack in the linoleum, every flicker in the neon sign outside. And yet, the road, it wasn't real. Not real in the way a road is supposed to be. No streetlights, no end, just black and fog. And I realized with a jolt that I hadn't thought about it before. Not really. Not in all those years. Every night I locked the doors I left it behind and never questioned where it went. My hands shook as I walked to the front door. I tried the handle, expecting it to be cold steel, familiar and sturdy. It was warm, almost pliable, like it was breathing too. I blinked, shaking my head, telling myself I was imagining it. 30 years of shifts will do that to you. Alone nights, long hours, shadows in corners that aren't really there. But my stomach twisted. The diner didn't feel like it should be mine anymore. It felt older, heavier, waiting. I stepped outside. The air hit me, thick and damp, smelling of rain that hadn't fallen in hours. The neon flickered faintly, and I noticed the first time that the parking lot wasn't gravel. It wasn't asphalt. It was black, featureless, stretching beyond where I could see. Not the road I had parked on, not the one I had driven home from 1,000 nights. Just nothing. Panic rose, but I told myself it was a trick of exhaustion. 30 years of routine will make your mind conjure things in the dark. But then I realized I had walked past the road every night, clocking out, heading home, and I couldn't remember ever leaving it. Not really, just stepping through it in my mind. And now it was gone, replaced by this black ribbon, curling into infinity. I turned back toward the diner. The lights flickered once, twice, and then steadied. Inside, the shadows were different, longer, thicker. They weren't the shadows of furniture or walls. They seemed to lean toward me, as if the building itself was alive and breathing. I could feel in the soles of my feet, in the small of my back, pressing at my chest like a hand I couldn't see. 30 years. 30 years of serving coffee, wiping counters, counting cash, locking doors. And I hadn't noticed. I hadn't realized. The diner had always been here, always familiar, but not real. Not really. Not outside of me. And now that I was alone outside, looking at that endless road, it made sense. The hours, the nights, the routines. They had been part of something older, something patient, something that had been waiting. I tried to take a step forward, away from the black ribbon of road, but my feet felt rooted. I turned, trying to retrace my steps, to go back inside, but the door was gone. Not gone in a shattered sense, just vanished. Smooth wall where the entrance should have been. The neon flickered, buzzing low, and I realized with a sudden, sick twist that I had been imagining the lights, the counter, the booths. 30 years. 30 years. And I had never seen the diner as it truly was. I whispered my own name, voice trembling. No response. Only the hum of the blackness outside, stretching endlessly. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Not mine. Not human. Heavy, deliberate, slow. Coming from inside the diner. Or maybe behind me. Maybe from the road. I couldn't tell. The sound echoed strangely, bending around the blackness like it was alive. Circling me, pressing closer. I spun. Nothing. Just a ribbon of road, and the mist curling along its edges. I whispered again. The sound of my own voice felt alien, wrong, like I was hearing it from too far away. The footsteps continued, echoing in impossible rhythms, sometimes near, sometimes far, sometimes inside me. I could feel the pulse of it, the building, the road, the night, ticking in my chest, matching my heartbeat, waiting for me to notice. I fell to my knees. The world tilted. 30 years. All the customers I had served, all the faces, all the orders, all the smiles, all the quiet conversations at 2 a.m., all of it had been shadows. Not just memories, but echoes, copies. The diner had held them, folded them into itself, claimed them quietly, patiently. And now it had me. I looked up. There was no sky, only black, curling endless. Only the flicker of neon that shouldn't have been there, humming low. I could feel shapes in it. faces pressed against the glass I couldn't see, watching me, waiting for me to notice the pattern, the rhythm, the time. 30 years of closing, 30 years of routine, 30 years of walking past a road that never existed. I screamed, and the sound was swallowed by the blackness. Not a human scream. Something deeper, something that reverberated in my chest. And then silence. Heavy, expectant silence. I was alone. And yet, I wasn't. I could feel them. All of them. Every person who had walked into the diner and never left. Watching. Waiting. I could feel the edges of the booths in my mind. The smell of coffee, the hum of the lights. I could hear their whispers. Faint at first, growing louder. Names. Orders. Laughs. Crying. A soft, insistent chorus that pressed against my ears, my chest, my mind. I stumbled forward, hand outstretched, trying to touch something real, anything real. The ribbon of road stretched beneath me, black and endless. I realized I didn't know how I had arrived here. I didn't know when the diner had become a place I couldn't leave. 30 years of work, and now the doors were gone, the road was gone, and the night had swallowed me whole. I sank to the ground. Cold pressed into my back, sharp and wet, like rain that hadn't fallen, like a storm that had been waiting for me all this time. The whispers grew louder. Shapes formed in the blackness. Faces pressed against the edges of my vision, smiling, leering, patient. The diner had always remembered them. Now it remembered me. I tried to call out. My voice trembled, strangled in my throat. The footsteps continued, circling, folding around the black ribbon of road. The diner pulsed in my mind. Every table, every chair, every light flicker, every smell, every sound alive. Waiting. And I realized I could never leave. That the road outside led nowhere. That the diner, my diner, had never been real in the way I thought. It had been waiting for me. For 30 years. I closed my eyes, trying to shut out the shapes, the whispers, the black road that stretched endlessly before me. But I could still feel it. The weight of decades, of hours, of meals served, of lives observed, all folding into the present. The diner had claimed everyone who lingered too long, who noticed too much, who counted the hours without seeing the pattern. And now I was part of it. 30 years. 30 years of closing time. And now the night was endless. The road was endless. The diner was endless. And I understood finally, with a last shiver comprehension, I had never left. I had only been waiting. First overnight shift. They called it the graveyard rotation. But I didn't understand why until I was handed the keys and the logbooks and shoved into the quiet halls of the station at 11 p.m. Everything was still, like the world had exhaled and gone to sleep. I'd been warned that nights were different, that the clock moved strangely, that the silence could weigh heavier than anything you'd felt in the day. I didn't believe it. Not until the moment I opened the first logbook. The station smelled like old paper and bleach, and the fluorescent lights hummed above me. I sat at the desk, flipping through the logbooks like I was supposed to memorize them overnight. Names, dates, times. Standard procedure, right? Until I noticed the gaps. Hours missing. Entries that ended abruptly. Resumed later with no explanation. Redactions. Entire lines blacked out. Names replaced with nothing. Just blank spaces. I frowned, tracing the lines of my finger. Who does this? I thought. Who leaves so many blanks? I flipped a page, and the next entry froze me. Same officer listed, same shift. But the dates didn't make sense. There were gaps, days missing, weeks missing. I could feel my pulse quicken. My eyes scanned faster, heart thumping in quiet. And then the strange thing, some entries had notes that didn't belong. Saw her at 2:17. He's not leaving. It waits. They were scribbled in handwriting I didn't recognize, but somehow familiar. I shook my head. Rookie nerves. The kind you feel when everything is new, when the station is empty, when the world outside is dark and still. I told myself it was nothing, just tired eyes. Maybe someone's idea of a joke decades ago. I tried to close the book, but the weight in my chest stopped me. Something about those pages, those missing hours, that heavy redaction, it pressed down on me, The shadows in the corners of the room seemed thicker than they should be, like the darkness had its own shape. I kept reading. The time gaps weren't consistent. Some shifts skipped 3 hours, others a full night, and in the margins, strange notes kept appearing. He listens from the hall. They come back. Do not sleep. I trace it with my finger, and it felt like cold had seeped into my bones. The lights above flickered, humming low. I told myself to breathe, to stay rational. But every instinct screamed that something was off, something I couldn't name. I stood and stretched, shoulders tight, neck cracking. The station was empty. I could hear the air conditioning, the faint hum of a distant refrigerator. But then footsteps, soft, deliberate, coming from the far end of the hall. I froze. My hand hovered over my flashlight, the one I kept in my drawer, just in case. The footsteps stopped. I listened. Nothing. I told myself it was someone else on shift. Maybe a late officer, checking the doors. But there was no one here. Only me. I went back to the logbook. My hand shook. I traced the redacted names with my fingertips. And for a moment, I thought I saw shapes beneath the black ink. Faces, twisted, blank, were staring at me from the pages. I blinked. Nothing. Just the ink, flat and cruel. I turned to the next page. Another gap. Another scribbled note. And then I saw it. A time entry that didn't make sense. 2:17 a.m. Saw her in the hallway. My stomach sank. I live in this station. I know these halls. Every door, every corner, every shadow. I had walked past this hallway 2 hours ago. No one was there. I told myself to leave it alone. Rookie imagination. Fatigue. But I couldn't. I flipped to the next book. And the next. Each one worse than the last. Redactions, gaps, notes. Descriptions of officers seeing things. Hearing things. Watching the same hallways I walked. At times that didn't exist in the shift schedule. I could feel a rhythm in the words, like a heartbeat. I could feel it syncing with mine. Every entry spoke of waiting, watching, following, something unseen, something patient. And then one line, "He is here now." My hands froze on the page. My breath caught. I looked up at the hallway, long and empty under the humming lights. My pulse hammered. The air felt heavier, pressed to my chest. My legs wanted to run, but I stayed rooted, reading every redacted name, every missing hour, every scribbled warning. The logbooks had been waiting for me. I realized that slowly, painfully, like ice sliding down my spine. They weren't just records. They were instructions, warnings, confessions, everything left by rookies, officers, long gone or missing, written in the margins when the world was asleep. And now it was my turn. I flipped further. The handwriting changed. Not consistent, not like mine. More frantic, larger loops, heavier ink. Do not close your eyes. He follows the schedule. The hallway bends. Words that made no sense until I remembered. I had walked that hallway earlier, and I remembered the feeling. A subtle pressure, like someone was behind me, just out of sight, waiting, watching, not in a human way, in a patient, deliberate way. I left the desk and walked to the hall. Footsteps echoing, cold air brushing my neck. Nothing visible, nothing that should be there, but I could feel it. Something in the shadows, in the angles, in the small flicker of light that didn't reach far enough. I remembered the notes. It waits. I reached the end of the hallway. My hand trembled on the doorknob. I turned it slowly. Room empty. Just office chairs, filing cabinets, and the hum of fluorescent lights. I exhaled, shaking. Told myself it was imagination of a rookie. Fatigue. Too much coffee. Too many late-night walks past empty hallways. And then I heard it. A whisper. Just a breath. So faint I thought I imagined it. He sees you. I spun. Nothing. Only shadows. Only the hum. Only the oppressive silence that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. My throat dry. My pulse loud. My knees weak. I grabbed the logbook. Pressed it to my chest. Something about it comforting. Warning. Alive. Waiting. I returned to my desk, sat down, hands trembling, eyes scanning the pages, and I noticed the pattern. The gaps, the redactions, the times. Each one corresponded to a different night, different officer. Same hallways, same footsteps, same whispers. And now my name wasn't written yet. Not that I could see, but I could feel it in the air. The shift would end and the logbooks would be waiting. Ready? Patient. I tried to distract myself. Coffee, the flick of a pen, notes on paper. Anything, but I could feel it. Pressing, patient. Waiting in the hallways I had walked. In the dark corners behind filing cabinets. Under the fluorescent hum. I wasn't alone. Not really. And I couldn't leave. Not yet. Not until I had finished my watch. Until the logbooks told me it was my turn to understand. I flipped one more page. A name redacted. Hours missing. A note in heavy. Slanted ink. Do not forget, he is always here. I swallowed. My hand shook. My pulse pounded. I traced the words with my fingertips. And I knew every officer before me had felt it, seen it, tried to explain it in notes, in logbooks, in the margins. And now, I would too. My first overnight, my rookie shift, my initiation. The shadows in the hallway shifted again, almost imperceptibly. I could feel the pressure behind me. The patient weight of presence, waiting for acknowledgement, waiting for me to see. The logbooks weren't just records. They were mirrors, reflections of what happened when someone noticed the gaps, the redactions, the missing hours. And they had been waiting for me. I leaned back in my chair, tried to breathe, tried to ignore it, but it pressed in deeper than I expected. The empty halls of the station, the humming lights, the logbooks filled with blacked out names and strange times. They weren't just history. They were alive, watching, waiting, recording. And I realized something that chilled me to my core. 30 minutes ago, I had been just a rookie on my first overnight. Now, I was part of it, part of the rotation, part of the pattern, part of the story that the logbooks had been keeping for decades. My heartbeat synced with theirs, with the missing hours, with the redactions. The station exhaled around me, dark and patient, alive in its own way. I closed the book, tried to stand. The footsteps in the hallway continued, not moving closer, not moving away, just there, always there. I tried to shake it off, tried to tell myself it was a trick of the night, a rookie's fear, but deep down I knew better. I had felt it before, in the edges of the hallway, in the flicker of light, in the empty hum of the station. I would finish my shift. I would record what I saw, write in the margins, leave notes, keep the pattern alive. And when my name appeared in the next redacted line, I would understand fully. The rotation had claimed me, and the logbooks had been waiting. I breathed, tried to steady my hands, tried to convince myself that the night would end, that morning would come, that the shadows would recede. But the hum persisted. The hallway waited. The gaps, the redactions, the missing hours, they pressed closer. Patient, relentless. And I knew, deep in my chest, that this was only the beginning. VBI wasn't supposed to be on that road. Not at 3:15 a.m., not alone, not under the sky that was blacker than it had any right to be. But the call came through the radio, faint, crackling, almost swallowed by the static. Check on the patrol car, County Route 9. My stomach tightened. I'd heard the stories about that road. The curves that don't make sense. The places that don't exist in daylight. The officers who disappeared overnight. But this was real. Or at least it felt real. I drove slow, headlights cutting through the fog that seemed to seep out of the trees. Rain had started. Thin at first, then heavier, bouncing off the hood like little drums. My wipers were no match. I could barely see 10 feet ahead. The road stretched straight and narrow, white lines glowing, wet, mocking me with their certainty. And then, in the distance, I saw it. Headlights, dim, moving, a patrol car. Alone, empty. My heart thudded. No one was supposed to be there. At least, not at that hour. I slowed, keeping my eyes on it. It didn't swerve, didn't brake, just moved. Smooth, steady, as if it knew the road better than anyone alive. I reached for the mic, but my voice faltered. I called it in. Dispatch. I see the vehicle on Route 9. It's moving. The crackle of the radio returned no answer, only static. I turned off the road, followed at a distance. The patrol car stayed just ahead, headlights reflecting on the wet asphalt, tires silent, almost gliding. My own tires hissed, spraying water. And then my stomach dropped. The car didn't have anyone inside. No officer, no shadow, empty, steering wheel moving slightly, as if guided by some unseen hand. I blinked, thinking I imagined it. Fog, exhaustion, late night shift, adrenaline. But no, it kept moving. Around the bends, past the mile markers, along the stretches where the forest pressed close. And then I saw it. My own reflection in the passenger window, distorted by the rain. But it wasn't me. My uniform, my face, eyes wide in fear. But not me, not alive. I gripped the wheel tighter. I had to stop it. Had to see if anyone or anything was in that car. I accelerated, kept it in sight. Tried to call again. Dispatch. I'm following. Vehicle moving by itself. The radio sputtered. Static. Then a voice. My own voice. Calm. Reporting the same thing I was seeing. Word for word. Only it had already happened. Like a recording. Only it hadn't been me yet. I slowed. Heart hammering. Couldn't breathe. The road curved sharply, and the patrol car stayed perfect, hugging the asphalt, obeying physics I couldn't reconcile. I caught sight of the dash cam inside, blinking, recording. I realized with a cold weight in my chest. It had been recording all along, watching, waiting, knowing I'd come. The rain came harder. Visibility dropped. I squinted through the windshield, and then the car stopped. Mid-road. No hazard lights. No engine noise. Nothing. Just stopped. And I could see it now, clearly through the sheets of rain. The driver's seat was empty, but the windshield fogged, but slowly forming letters. Words written from the inside, dripping down like condensation on glass. You're next. I swallowed hard, foot trembling on the pedal. Tried to turn, but the tires skidded. The road seemed longer now, stretching farther than it should. The patrol car began to move again, silently, gliding forward, headlights reflecting on wet asphalt, like it was leading me somewhere. Somewhere I didn't want to go. My hands shook as I followed. Minutes passed, or was it hours? Time felt wrong. The dash cam caught everything. I could see it in flashes, the tiny red recording light blinking. Recorded a road that no one should be on, a car that shouldn't exist. And the more I followed, the more I realized the car wasn't just driving itself. It was replaying something, a patrol from long ago, from a shift I hadn't yet lived, or maybe from one I couldn't escape. I thought of the missing officers, the ones who had patrolled this route and never returned, names that appeared in reports, in whispers, in logbooks. I remember my training. If you follow, keep your distance. Never underestimate what's unexplainable. Rookie advice. Words I repeated to myself now like a prayer, like a mantra. But I was too close. Too involved. Too aware. The patrol car swerved. Perfectly. Around curves I knew, around ones I didn't. My headlights reflected briefly on something in the distance. A figure? Or just a shadow? I couldn't tell. Rain pelted the windshield, smudging the vision. And then a realization slammed me. The dash cam wasn't just recording. It was showing me. Every time a patrol car moved, every break, every curve, every stop. It was a mirror, a memory, a warning. Something meant for me to see. I tried to radio in again. My voice cracked. Dispatch the vehicle, it's static. Then my own voice, calm, professional, reporting the patrol car moving along County Route 9. Every word, every pause, every inflection, mine, recorded long before I spoke it, like it had been waiting for me to follow, for me to confirm. I slowed. The patrol car stopped again, midway down the straight stretch, headlights slicing through fog, and I could see it. Not a person, not a shadow, Something's wrong. The outline of the driver blurred but human-shaped. Head tilted at an impossible angle. Hands on the wheel just barely. And then the head turned, and I saw my face. My uniform. My hands on the steering wheel. Only pale, wrong, eyes wide with terror. I hit the brakes. Tires skidded. Heart pounding. Fog wrapping around the car. Wrapping around me. And then it happened. The patrol car reversed. Slowly. Smoothly. No sound. Perfectly controlled. Coming back toward me. Not to hit me. Not yet. Just returning. Guiding me. Like it had always known I would follow. And it wanted me to see. I stopped, shaking. Rain poured down my windshield. Headlights reflecting on the asphalt like eyes. Watching, waiting. I thought about turning, running, driving away. But the road didn't go anywhere. Or maybe it went where I wasn't supposed to return from. Every curve, every mile marker, every reflection in the wet pavement seemed wrong. Twisted, wrong. I realized I'd been alone on this road before. Not literally, but figuratively. Every officer who disappeared had been alone, following the same path, caught in the same loop. And now I was here. Rookie on his first solo patrol, night shift 3:15 a.m., following a patrol car that shouldn't exist. Following myself in a way I couldn't explain. The patrol car stopped again. Engine silent. Dash cam blinking. Fog windshield forming words. I squinted, breath freezing in the cold air from my vent. Turn around. You can't leave. My hands trembled, tried to radio in. Nothing, only static. And then, faintly, a voice. My voice, calm, professional, detailing every mile I had driven, every turn, every observation, every reaction, every mistake. It was rehearsed, predicted, waiting for me to complete the story. I realized then that I wasn't chasing a patrol car. I was following a record of myself, or someone who had been me, or someone who would be me. I couldn't stop. I couldn't turn. The road had me. The car had me. And the dash cam knew me better than I knew myself. Minutes or hours passed. I don't know. Time doesn't move the same on County Route 9 at 3:15 a.m. I felt my mind slipping, reality bending. The patrol car moved on its own, but I followed, pulled forward, compelled. And I understood this was what happened to everyone who disappeared here. They didn't vanish. They became the story. They became the recording. They became the guide for the next person to follow. I gripped the wheel, knuckles white, heartbeat loud. I couldn't stop, couldn't escape, couldn't abandon the dash cam, the patrol car, the road. And I knew, deep in my chest, that the moment I did, I would vanish, just like the others, absorbed into the loop, recorded, waiting for someone else. Someone new. Rookie, late night shift, 3:15 a.m. The patrol car slowed, then stopped completely at a curve I recognized but didn't. Fog curled around it, headlight beams reaching into nothing. I edged closer, not fully understanding why, only knowing I had to see. And in that light, I saw it, the driver's seat, empty, except for a shadow. And then the dash cam blinked, red, recording. And I realized it was me. I am the patrol car. I am the road. I am the recording. Waiting for the next rookie to follow, to see, to understand. 3:15 a.m. County Route 9. The night never ends, and the patrol continues. I shouldn't have opened the file. I knew at the moment my hands brushed the folder tucked behind the standard reports, the one labeled in sloppy handwriting. Do not log this. My chest tightened, my stomach curled. Something about it screamed, don't. But curiosity is a cruel companion when the night is silent and the station is empty. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed faintly, and I felt the weight of decades pressing down, even though I've only been here a few years. The desk smelled of old paper, coffee stains, the faint tang of metal. I pulled the folder forward, careful not to drop it, and flipped it open. My own handwriting stared back at me. Not my handwriting. Not yet. Notes, meticulous, detailed, observations from my own shift, comments about missing hours, about the quiet hum in the hallways, about shadows in corners where shadows shouldn't exist, about things moving just outside the light, about me, written in my pen, my style, my cadence. Only the date on top of the page. It was next week. I froze. The air went cold. My fingers hovered over the folder. The hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to swell, pressing into my ears. I leaned closer. Each line, each word, familiar. I could hear myself in the sentences, the tone I use when I take notes, the way I abbreviate shifts, the way I leave spaces for observations I know I'll forget. But this wasn't a memory. It was a warning, a prediction, and the date told me the truth I didn't want to know. I wouldn't make it to next week. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone had forged the notes. Maybe it was a prank, a test. But the pen I held trembled in my hand, and the folder was cold, unnaturally cold, like it had been waiting for me to see, waiting for me to understand. My pulse hammered as I read on. The notes were about tonight, about me, about my own patrols, about the things I thought I had imagined. The static in the radio, the strange footsteps echoing through the halls, the shadows that leaned too close, the whispers in the vents. Every detail I remembered, every fear I had pushed aside, written, dated next week, waiting for me to relive it. I tried to close the folder. My hand shook. I couldn't. My eyes caught the margin notes, written smaller, almost hidden, words scrawled like a warning. Do not follow the pattern. Do not log this. It will end you. End me. The words echoed in my mind like a hammer. My stomach dropped. My eyes darted to the window. The night outside was still. The streetlights flickered like dying stars. But I could feel it, watching, waiting. The weight of something older than the station, older than me, pressing against the edges of reality. I had been following it unknowingly, each shift, each log, each observation, and now it was all too clear. I sat back in my chair, trying to steady my breathing. I thought about leaving the folder on the desk, walking away, pretending I never saw it. But the notes were already in my mind, already embedded. The words hummed. The sentences lingered. The date stared at me like an accusation. Next week. I wouldn't make it to next week. I thought of my last shift. The hallway. The hum. The footsteps that weren't mine. The lights flickering, just enough to keep me on edge. I remembered the radio chatter. The reports of empty patrol cars. The missing officers. Every anomaly I had brushed aside, rationalized, told myself was fatigue or imagination. None of it was imagination. None of it. The folder slipped slightly in my hands. I gripped it tighter. The edges felt heavier, sharper, as if the paper itself carried a weight beyond its substance. I could feel in my chest a pressure building, a rhythm matching my pulse, and I realized with sudden, horrifying clarity. The folder had been waiting for me to see, for me to understand that I was already part of the cycle, already part of the pattern. I thought of my next shift. I thought of the notes, the predicted events, the way the building bends at night, the shadows that gather where shadows shouldn't be, the footsteps, always the footsteps. And then it hit me. The next shift wouldn't come for me, not in the way I imagined, not in any way I could control. I tried to reason. I tried to rationalize. It's a prediction, I whispered to myself. I can change it. I can avoid it. But the folder seemed to pulse in my hands, as if it knew the lie I was telling myself. The handwriting blurred, or maybe my vision did. The words swam before my eyes, shifting, coiling, folding back onto themselves. Every line a warning, every line a chain. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, my pulse loud, and then I heard it, a whisper, so soft I thought I imagined it. My own voice, but wrong. Calm, professional, reporting the same observations I had just read, reporting the patterns, reporting the cycle, waiting for me to notice, waiting for me to follow. I dropped the folder. It hit the desk with dull thud, but the paper seemed to rise again, hovering, edges curling slightly. I stepped back. Cold seeped into my legs. The fluorescent lights flickered, then steadied. Shadows stretched long across the room, shapes in corners I didn't know were there. Waiting, patient, watching. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run. But the doors of the station felt farther than they should. The hallway twisted in angles I didn't remember. The radio hummed. Static. Then the faint, unmistakable sound of footsteps. Behind me? Ahead? I didn't know. I didn't dare turn. I realized then that the notes weren't just predictions. They were instructions. They were records of what would happen if someone noticed a pattern. And now I had noticed. Now I was a part of it. The folder, the building, the night. They had been waiting patiently for me. I tried a radio in. My voice caught. The mic squealed with static. And then, unmistakably, my own words returned to me. Calm, professional, recording observations about the shift, about me, about the hallway, about the things no one else could see, about the pattern, about the cycle, about the inevitability. I stumbled backward. My back hit the wall. Cold seeped through my uniform. The folder hovered in the air, pages rustling as if blown by a wind that didn't exist. The words shifted again. Do not log this. Do not follow the cycle. You will not make it. I sank to the floor, hands pressed my head, tried to force a memory away, tried to pretend it was a joke, a trick, a hallucination. But deep down I knew. I had felt it before. The pressure, the weight, the footsteps, the building itself. Waiting. And now it had me. Minutes or hours, I don't know, passed. Time felt warped. The lights flickered. Shadows lengthened. And then, faintly, I heard a shuffle. Behind the desk, in the hallway, the folder lifted higher, spinning slowly, pages flapping like wings. And I understood I wasn't alone. Not really. Never alone on these shifts. Never alone when the folder appeared. I thought of next week. The date on the top of the page. The handwriting. My handwriting. The warnings I was supposed to follow. And I realized with every fiber of my being that I wouldn't make it. Not to next week. Not to the next shift. Not ever. The footsteps grew louder. Echoed, warped, bouncing through the walls. The folder snapped shut on its own, landed with finality that echoed in the empty station. Shadows pulled beneath desks and filing cabinets. The hum of the lights deepened. The building breathed around me, patient, deliberate, waiting. I pressed myself against the wall, eyes wide, unable to look anywhere else. My pulse thundered in my ears. I whispered to myself, over and over, do not log this. Do not log this. But the words felt hollow, useless. The night had already claimed me. The folder had already claimed me. The pattern had already claimed me. I thought of the officers before me. Missing, vanished, folded into the night. I thought of their notes, their warnings, their marginal scribbles. And I understood fully. This is what happens when you notice, when you read, when you follow, when you try to understand. The cycle does not forgive. The night does not wait. The folder does not lie. I did not know if I screamed, if I called out, if anyone heard me. The building remained silent, watching, waiting. And I realized finally, fully, with a weight in my chest that made breathing hard. The next shift doesn't come for me, not in any way I can control. I am already part of the record, already in the margin, already written. I closed my eyes, tried to steady my breathing, tried to imagine morning, tried to imagine the doors opening, the lights turning off, the world outside the station. But the shadows were already moving, the footsteps already circling, the folder already waiting, my notes already written in ink that has yet to exist. And I understood noticing was a mistake, reading was a mistake, following the pattern, even in thought, was a mistake. And now, I was here, the folder hovering, the station alive, the night endless, and I would not make it to my next shift, not next week, not ever. Night shift, quiet, sterile, endless corridors of pale green and white, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears and makes your heartbeat sound like thunder in your skull. I've been working nights for a while, but there's always something different about the first hour, that shift from ordinary to something off. That night, it began with the monitors. I was walking past the ICU, checking vitals, making my rounds, when I noticed it. A bed blinking on the monitor. Unassigned, not in the chart. No patient in the room, at least none I could see. My brow furrowed. Maybe a technical error. Glitches happen. Machines aren't perfect. I shook it off. But the monitor kept blinking. Heart rate steady. Breathing normal. Pulse strong. Everything normal. Except there was no one there. I leaned closer. The bed number was one I didn't recognize. It wasn't any of the rooms I'd passed. I pulled up the chart on my tablet. Nothing. The software showed an empty slot. Not a scheduled patient. No notes. Nothing. I told myself it was a mistake. Probably someone forgot to update the system. That's all. But my stomach tightened. There's a difference between a mistake and something you feel. Something alive. And I could feel it. Cold. Patient. Watching. I checked the hall. Empty. Silent. Machines hummed in rhythm with my heartbeat. I told myself to continue rounds, but curiosity gnawed. I had to know which room the bed belonged to. I walked slowly down the corridor, eyes scanning. Nothing. Each room door closed. Each room empty or with sleeping patients I knew by name. Nothing new. Nothing unassigned. And yet the monitor kept blinking. I returned to the nurse's station. Looked at the screen again. The heart rate. Steady. Breathing. Steady. And then it changed. Not drastically, just a small blip. A pause. Like the patient was aware of me. Like the bed recognized my presence. I swallowed hard. Hello. I whispered. The corridor stayed silent. My voice sounded too loud. Like it had no business being there. My own shadow stretched on the wall, wavering under the harsh fluorescent lights. I sat at the station, studying the monitor. The bed number blinked steadily. Regular. Normal. Except for the fact that no one was there. And that's when I noticed something else. The vital signs weren't random. They were familiar. Not exactly mine, but someone I knew. A rhythm I had memorized years ago. Patterns in the data. Matching nurses. Patients long gone. Ghosts of shifts past. I felt the hairs on my arms stand on end. Machines don't remember. Machines don't notice. But this was not a machine. I walked to the floor plan. Traced the bed numbers. One missing. One gap where it should have been. A room that didn't exist. At least not according to the charts. But according to the monitors, the patient existed. And then I saw it. Something on the screen. A flicker. Brief. A silhouette moving in the room. Just a shadow. Just a shape. But human. Almost human. I blinked. My eyes adjusted. Nothing. Empty room. But the monitor still showed life. Still showed a heartbeat, breathing, a presence that shouldn't exist. I called the night supervisor. Quiet, nervous. I think there's an unassigned patient on the monitors. Bed 9, no chart, no record. Static. A pause. Then calm. Check again. Probably a glitch. Don't worry. Keep monitoring. I hung up, heart racing. The monitor flickered again. Same rhythm. Steady. Calm. Alive. I couldn't let it go. Couldn't ignore it. I walked the floors again. Room 308. I remember the number because the first time I walked past it, something about the air made me stop. Cold, yes, but not just cold. It was heavy, oppressive, like it pressed against your lungs and refused to leave. You notice it at first in the back of your mind. Then it follows you. I had only been on nights for a few weeks when it started. The supervisor warned me in a casual way, like she wasn't supposed to mention it. Avoid 308 if you can. Her tone was offhand, but her eyes, they didn't lie. She'd seen it. She'd felt it. Everyone had. The first nurse to disappear. Well, not disappear exactly. Had checked vitals in that room. Coughing fits that never seemed to end. The second nurse, same thing. Mild at first. A tickle, a clearing of the throat, then more violent coughing until they couldn't keep fluids down. Each one recorded in the log. Each one followed by sick leave that stretched weeks. I thought it was coincidence. Maybe a mold problem, ventilation. Hospitals are old. Things happen, but the pattern is a different kind of fear. You notice patterns. Night after night, week after week, room 308 becomes a warning before it's a reality. I was assigned to check it once. Just routine. Patient stable, vitals normal, nothing unusual. I walked in, clipboard in hand. The air hit me first. It wasn't just cold, it was wrong. The monitors hummed a faint tone. A vibration in the floor I could feel through my shoes. The lights flickered slightly, and in that flicker, shadows moved where shadows shouldn't. I put my hand on the patient's wrist. Pulse strong, breathing steady, normal. But the air had hummed against my skin like tiny pinpricks, electric, alive. I coughed in a small dry cough, tried to clear my throat, thought it was dust, but the tickle lingered. I left the room and tried to shake it off. By the end of the week, the cough returned. A deep, chest-shaking cough that kept me awake. I checked with other nurses. Same. All of them who had touched that room. All of them who had looked at the monitors, written notes, touched the sheets. Coughing. Persistent. It made me nervous, but I had shifts to cover. Nights are long. Responsibilities constant. You can't run from it. I returned, clipboard in hand again, documenting, checking vitals, adjusting the floor, and something else. A faint noise. Not a machine. Not a call bell. Whispering. Too faint to catch words. Just a sound beneath your awareness. By the third visit, my cough had returned in earnest. It hurt to breathe. My chest burned. Still, I had work to do. Still, I walked in, monitors humming. Nothing unusual. And yet, the feeling, the pressure, the weight of the room was different, denser, watching, patient, calculating. I leaned closer to the patient. Pulse strong, breathing even. Nothing wrong medically. But the monitor had a small glitch. A flatline blip, just one frame. Like the heart paused and knew I was watching. My pulse spiked. My own breath caught. I looked around, convinced someone was there. The room was empty, only me, the patient, and something else. By the fifth day, my throat was raw, my voice weak. I coughed constantly. I started skipping water, fearing it would trigger more. Other nurses whispered about it, about how it always starts subtly, never everyone at once, never the same way, but always the same effect. Room 308 leaves marks, and then you wonder if it waits, if it chooses, if it remembers. I checked the logbooks. Names redacted after the first entry, or sick leave noted vaguely. No, doctor wants to admit a pattern. Administration never acknowledges it, but you notice it. You notice patterns. And once you see it, it doesn't leave. You remember every detail, every patient, every visit, every cough that started days after being there. I had to document everything. As I sat at the nurse's station, compiling notes, checking past logs, my cough worsened. Sharp, painful, almost spasmodic. I pressed a hand to my chest. The air was thick, heavier than usual, even in the break room. I told myself it was stress, overwork, night shift, but I couldn't ignore the timing. Later, another nurse came in, whispering, "Don't go near 308 tonight. You'll regret it." Her eyes wide, pale, nervous. She left quickly. I stayed, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Something drew me to it. Curiosity, obligation, fear. The patient was stable. Vitals were normal. But you don't enter that room for help. You enter for truth. And truth doesn't always make sense. I gathered my courage, walked the corridor slowly. The flickering fluorescent lights reflected in the polished floor. Shadows stretched unnaturally. I felt them behind me. They weren't moving, not exactly, but I could feel eyes tracing me, following me, patient, silent, waiting. Room 308 door closed. White, sterile, ordinary, but the handle was cold, so cold it burned through my glove. I hesitated, heart pounding. Monitors inside hummed faintly, almost whispering. I swallowed, opened the door. Patient asleep, vitals normal. Nothing unusual, but the air wrong, the pressure against my chest. the way the shadows bent where they shouldn't. I coughed, dry, hacking. The sound bounced off the walls, echoing faintly. Not a machine echo. Not me echo. Something else. Something waiting. I stepped closer. The bed felt colder than it should. Sheets taut, smooth. No sign of struggle, no signs of illness. But the monitors flickered again, a slight blip like the heart skipped a beat, acknowledged me, recognized me. I wanted to leave, but my feet felt rooted. By the end of the week, my cough worsened. Deep rattling. Sleepless nights. Chest tight. Other nurses avoided me, whispering in corners. The ones who'd visited room 308 before me. Same story. Cough. Sick leave. Recovery slow. Lingering. As if the room leaves a mark. Not physically, but in the blood, in the lungs, in the mind. I went back one more time. Needed to see for myself. Needed to record, to document, to understand. I entered. Air cold, heavier than before. Shadows stretched, bending along walls, ceiling, floor. Monitor humming low, almost a whisper. Patient asleep, vitals normal. My pulse quickened, and then I saw it. A flicker on the monitor. Not random, not mechanical. Patterned, observing me. I wanted to step back, leave, run, but I didn't. Couldn't. Drawn in. Fear mixed with curiosity. Breath shaky. Cough returning. My own presence acknowledged. And then I realized room 308 isn't just a room. Not just a patient. It's a test. A marker. A place that remembers who enters. Who touches. Who watches. Who cares. I left trembling. Coughing. Chest tight. Stomach knotted. But the monitor continued to blink in my mind. The pattern repeated. Other nurses who visited before me. I knew their names. Their faces. Their coughs. Their fear. And now me, added to the list. Part of the cycle. I told myself it was coincidence. Ventilation problem. Mold. Virus. Anything rational. But deep down I knew the patterns never lie. Room 308 doesn't forget. It doesn't forgive. And every nurse who checks the vitals coughs. Always. Within a week. Now, whenever I walk past the door, I feel the air change. Cold, heavy. Watching. Waiting. Shadows move where they shouldn't. The monitor hums in my memory. Soft but insistent. Reminding me. Reminding every nurse. Whoever enters leaves a mark. And that mark lingers. I don't enter anymore. I avoid it. But every night, when the corridor is silent, I hear it. A cough. A faint whisper. Someone else. Or maybe me. Night shift changes are supposed to be quiet, uneventful, routine. You pass the baton to the next nurse. Log your observations. Walk out under the hum of fluorescent lights. And pretend that the shadows in the hallways aren't watching. But room 308 doesn't care about routine. Room 308 doesn't care about you. I was reviewing the security footage after my shift. Something I didn't usually do. But the previous nights had left me restless, coughing, haunted by that steady pulse on the monitor that shouldn't exist. The supervisor had shrugged, said nothing, pretended everything was normal. But I could see it if I looked close enough. On the first camera, the patient lay still, asleep, monitors flat, nothing unusual. But then, half an hour later, the same patient. Room 308 sat up, just a flicker, a shadowy shift in the sheets. The kind of movement that makes your stomach sink and your heartbeat accelerate. The timestamp read 2:17 a.m. I froze the footage, blinked, replayed it, nothing. And then I realized the next clip, camera in a different hallway, footage from the storage room. The patient was sitting in a chair, fully awake, not lying in bed, not on the monitor, just there, watching. But there's no camera in that room. How could the system even record that? I leaned closer to the screen. Shadows move around the figure. Or maybe it was the figure moving around the shadows. The timestamp, 3:02 a.m. I traced the footage, jumping back and forth. The patient shifted again. Different camera, different room. No obvious way to get there. And yet, there they were, always in view, always present. I sat back, my chest tightened, cold seeped into my spine. I could feel the room behind me, the empty hallways outside, the monitors humming. I coughed weak dry, a tickle in my throat that had started the first week. I checked 308. It's never gone. And now, watching the footage, it made sense. The patient follows the night, moves when no one watches, exists when no one sees. I called the night supervisor, voice trembling. You need to check the footage. Room 308, the patient, they're moving. There was a long pause. The line staticed slightly. Then calm, clipped. Re-watched the timestamp. Probably a glitch. Cameras flicker at night. You're tired. Go home early if you must. I hung up, hand shaking. The footage didn't lie. The patient was everywhere. Sitting in a chair in the supply room at 2:45, on the monitor again at 3:10, standing in a hallway at 3:22. Each time, the movement's subtle, silent, watching, calculated. I try to rationalize it. Multiple patients, doppelgangers, mistaken cameras, but the file names, timestamps, everything aligned. Room 308, single patient, same vitals, same readings, always the same. I started tracing the shifts, noting times, patterns, a sequence forming that shouldn't exist, always moving, always appearing, always in places no camera should capture, and sometimes appearing on monitors in rooms that weren't even connected to 308, rooms with no patient beds, rooms with no charts. By the third day, I couldn't sleep. My chest burned with each cough. Shadows stretched in my apartment like the hallways at the hospital. I replayed the footage obsessively. Every movement, every shadow, every flicker of the timestamp. I noticed something else. The patient's eyes. Dark, unmoving, fixed. Not awake, not asleep, watching. Not at me, not yet, but the awareness was there, sharp, patient, waiting. And every time the footage blinked, every time the frame shifted, I felt it notice me. I went back to the hospital early, reviewing the monitors before my shift officially began. Nothing unusual. Vitals stable. Patient asleep. Sheets smooth. Equipment quiet. The world ordinary. And yet, the footage told the truth. Another layer of reality hiding beneath the fluorescent lights, the polished floors, the hallways I knew by memory. I found myself wandering the corridors at night, past the rooms, past 308, listening to the hum, the subtle vibration underfoot, the faint whisper of movement that wasn't mine. My footsteps echoed too loudly. I tried to catch shadows, tried to see the figure myself, always gone when I looked directly. But sometimes in the corner of my eye, I'd see it, shifting, patient, waiting. Other nurses avoided room 308 when they could. Whispers in the break room. Don't go near it. Coughing starts after visiting. It moves when you're not looking. I kept a notebook. Names, dates, times. Patterns emerging. All consistent. All impossible. By week's end, I was exhausted. Coughing fits that stole my breath. My reflection in the security monitors stared back at me, pale and hollow-eyed. I went over the footage again. The patient sat up at 1:45, then 2:17, 2:45, 3:02. Always awake, always alert, always moving. And I realized it wasn't just a patient. The room itself shifted. Hallways seemed longer. Shadows bent differently. The air heavier. Watching. Waiting. The hospital had always been alive at night. But 308. 308 was conscious. Intentional. I spoke to a colleague. Voice low, urgent. You've seen it, right? Room 308. The footage. She nodded, eyes wide. I try not to. The supervisors pretend it's normal. But yes, it's there. Always there. Watching. Waiting. We didn't speak much after that. Fear shared in glances, in silence. My cough worsened. My chest burned. But the footage was a proof. The pattern. And the pattern doesn't lie. I returned to monitors at night, tracing the movements, sitting in chairs, standing in hallways, shadows, corners, Monitors in rooms that shouldn't have cameras. Always present. Always aware. Always silent. I thought of leaving. Quitting. But curiosity, obsession, it pulled me back. To watch. To document. To survive. But survival here is measured differently. Each movement the patient makes, each frame, each shadow, it reminds you that noticing is dangerous. Following is inevitable. By the end of my shift, I sat alone, coughing fits rattling my chest, monitors flickering, shadows bending, and I realized something I had suspected but never admitted. The patient doesn't sleep. The patient doesn't rest. The patient exists outside normal time, and every nurse who watches, who notices, carries a mark. Shift change came. Colleagues arrived. Morning light pushing through the windows. Routine resumed. But I knew what happened in the dark. Footage replayed endlessly in my mind. The patient sitting in chairs, in hallways, in rooms without cameras. Watching. Patient. Waiting. Even after leaving the hospital, I could feel it. A presence. A weight. A whisper beneath my awareness. Shadows moving when no one's there. I know the pattern. I see it now. Always moving, always aware, always waiting. Room 308 doesn't belong to the day. It doesn't belong to the charts. It belongs to the night. And those who watch it, those who follow its movements, carry the memory, the warning, the cough, the dread. I've stopped walking past that door when possible. I avoid the hallway at night. I avoid monitors when alone. But the footage is inside me now. Always. A constant pulse beneath my ribs. A rhythm I cannot ignore. The patient moves. Always moves. And I know if I ever blink, if I ever look away, it will be somewhere else. Waiting. Watching. And next week, someone else will notice. Someone else will record. Someone else will cough. I knew it was coming. I had felt it since the first night I laid eyes on room 308. Every cough, every shadow, every flicker on the monitors had been leading to this moment. And yet, when the door swung open, nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. The hallway was quiet, too quiet. The hum of the fluorescent lights overhead felt like it was holding its breath. I gripped the handle of the door, cold against my glove, and forced it open. The room was still, empty, except for patient. My responsibility. Or so I thought. But the bed, my heart slammed against my ribs before I even realized it. I froze. I could feel the blood draining from my face, leaving a cold numbness at the back of my neck. There, lying perfectly still under the pale hospital sheets, was me, my body, my own face, pale under the harsh lights, chest rising and falling in slow, even breaths. Breathing. Alive. I stepped back. My feet hit the floor with a soft scrape, but it felt like I just entered a dream I couldn't wake from. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My throat was tight, the cough I had tried to fight returning violently, rattling in my chest, leaving me gasping for air. I looked closer. Every detail was mine. Every scar, every freckle, every tiny imperfection. The sheets were tucked in neatly, like someone had arranged them while I wasn't looking. My ID badge still clipped to the uniform. My stethoscope draped across my chest. And yet, it wasn't me in control. I swayed, gripping the edge of the counter. The monitors hummed softly, each beep steady, calm. Vitals normal. Pulse regular. Breathing even. Nothing about the patient indicated distress. Nothing except the impossible reality of seeing myself lying there waiting. My mind raced. Panic clawed at me, sharp and relentless. This wasn't reflection. The mirror on the wall confirmed the reality. I moved past it. There, my reflection staring back at me, pale and wide-eyed, mouth opening and closing, but no sound escaping. I tried to speak. Words failed me. My own voice trembled, cracking on the first syllable. W. The bed shifted slightly. My body lifted its head, just a fraction, eyes opening. Dark, calm, unblinking. They were watching me, waiting, patient, familiar and alien all at once. I stumbled back, my hand hitting the wall. The cool paint pressed against my skin, grounding me, reminding me I was still in a world I knew, still alive. But the bed held another version of me, alive, breathing, calm, patient, observing. I thought of every nurse I had spoken to, every caution whispered in the hallways, every cough that had started after a visit. I realized then that 308 didn't just affect patients. It didn't just mark the living. It could replicate, trap, and twist the mind. I tried to step closer. Rationality fought panic. Maybe this was some hallucination. Maybe fatigue and stress. Too many nights, too many patterns and logs had created this doppelganger. But the coughing, the dry, hacking cough that had racked my chest all week, reminded me this was no hallucination. My double reached out its hand. Slow, deliberate, not menacing, not angry, curious, observant. It mimicked my movements almost perfectly, a shadow of my intent. The fingertips hovered just above the sheets. I felt the air shift, heavier than before, almost alive, watching, responding. I backed up, panic building, thoughts scrambling. How could this be possible? I had trained for emergencies, crises, even rare cases of infection and unusual symptoms, but never this. Never a patient who was me, who breathed, who waited, who existed. The monitor beeped steadily. Calm, normal. My vitals, mine or not, matched the bed. Everything aligned. The world was coherent, and yet impossible. My own body lay beneath the sheets, breathing in perfect rhythm, chest rising and falling like a metronome, mocking my disbelief. I remembered the security footage, sitting up in chairs, standing in hallways, moving through walls where cameras didn't exist, always watching, always patient, always aware. Room 308 wasn't just a room. It was a trap, a quarantine, and somehow it had made me its next inhabitant, or perhaps its observer. I tried to leave, step back, run if I could, but the door, it slammed shut before I could touch it. No wind, no hand, just the pressure of inevitability. The hum of the fluorescent lights warped slightly, flickering. Shadows bent toward me, not threatening, just patient, expectant. I swallowed hard, coughing violently. My chest burned. I pressed my hand to the bed rail. My body, my double, shifted slightly, eyes following every movement. It was awake, conscious, alive, and yet it wasn't me, not entirely. I wanted to call for help. Voice quivering, I tried. Help. Nothing. Sound swallowed by the room. The walls seemed closer, the air thicker, and then I noticed the shadows. They weren't just shapes. They moved against the fluorescent hum, bending around the bed, the monitors, me, watching, calculating, waiting. I realized in the truth. Room 308 didn't just trap patients. It trapped reality. Time, space, patterns, memories. You entered, and you became part of its rhythm, its observation. My cough, my exhaustion, my fear, not symptoms, but signatures, marks of presence, proof that the room was alive, patient, aware. I couldn't stop staring. My patient, moved again, hands adjusting the sheets, turning slightly on the pillow. Calm, precise, observant. It mimicked life, but life in 308 was never ordinary, not simple, not natural. It had layers, angles, intentions I couldn't comprehend. Minutes, hours, time blurred. My watch said one thing. The monitors said another. Shadows shifted, whispers of sound brushing against my ears. Not voices, not words, just the brush of air, the subtle vibration of presence. I realized I couldn't leave. Not truly, not without taking a part of it with me, not without marking myself. I leaned closer to the bed, trembling. My own hands hovered over my double, watching, studying, recording in memory every detail, every subtle movement, the cold radiating from the mattress, the faint pulse beneath the sheets, the way the sheets clung to my double's form as if alive. And then I understood, room 308 doesn't just replicate. It observes, it tests, it quarantines, and it ensures its visitors leave altered, marked, aware. It had been preparing me, conditioning me through coughs, shadows, pattern security footage, every detail leading to this moment. I stepped back, chest heaving, hands shaking. My double remained calm, breathing, watching, waiting. The hum of the monitors synced with my heartbeat, my own rhythm imprinted, matched, my own presence recognized, a cycle completed. And yet, it wasn't the end. I realized that the quarantine never ends. Not for me, not for anyone. Room 308 is patient, immortal in intent, waiting for the next observation, the next shadow, the next breath. And I am now part of it, observer and observed, alive but altered, a participant in its rhythm. I left the room finally, door closed behind me, air lighter, hallway still. Fluorescent lights flickered their usual pattern, but the memory, the image of myself lying in that bed, breathing, watching, remained. I coughed still, faintly, chest tight, heart racing. But now I understand. The room isn't evil. Not exactly. It's a record, a quarantine, a presence, alive in ways we can't measure. And every nurse, every observer, every visitor leaves a signature, proof that it exists, proof that it is patient, proof that it is waiting. I walked the hallways the rest of the night, avoiding room 308 when possible, though every step carried the echo of that bed, that body, that presence. Every shadow bent strangely in the corner of my eye. Every hum of the monitors reminded me, and I knew with certainty that when my shift ended, when I left the building, when I tried to sleep, the quarantine would follow. I am here. I am observed. I am altered. And room 308 is patient, always patient, waiting for the next shift, the next visitor, the next signature to mark its history. And maybe one day I will return. The first time I noticed it, I thought it was my imagination. I'd been tending the grounds of the old cemetery for years, shoveling, raking, patching, making sure everything looked neat for the living who came to remember the dead. Uneven graves happen. Soil settles. Headstones tilt. That's nature. But some graves didn't follow the rules. I first saw it early one morning. Fog clinging to the ground like a shroud. The grave of a man named Weller, small stone, freshly repaired the week before, had sunk again, not just a little. Enough that the flowers I had planted leaned at an unnatural angle. I knelt to check the soil. It was loose, soft, like it hadn't been tamped down at all. I frowned, pulled out the wooden stakes we used to mark repaired graves. Everything lined up the day before. And now, off kilter, my fingers brushed the cold dirt. Something about it felt off. Not just soft, but heavier, dense, as if the ground beneath it wanted to give, wanted to swallow. I shook my head. Couldn't be. Just uneven soil. Just settling. But the unease stayed with me all day. Next morning, same grave. Weller. Sunk deeper. The stakes were tilted. The soil loose, yet somehow cold beneath my hands. Cold like early winter, though the morning air had no chill. I felt it in my fingertips, creeping up my arms. And then I noticed the other graves. Small ones, large ones, old stones with names barely legible. A pattern I hadn't noticed before. A handful of graves, the same ones, sinking slightly, evenly, deliberately. I measured the Weller grave. Down 2 inches, even after tamping the soil. I adjusted it again, left for the day, returned, 3 inches. No wind, no rain, nothing, just the ground, moving against my effort. I started marking them, red string between stakes. Careful measurement with the level. Same graves, same movement, always sinking. Every night, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the soil was unstable. Maybe an underground stream. Maybe roots of ancient trees, expanding, contracting. But none of it made sense. The plots were old, yes, but I'd worked here long enough to know how the earth behaved. These graves weren't following nature. They were deliberate, I began to feel watched. At first, it was a whisper in my mind, an unease I could shake with a cigarette or a cup of coffee. But as night stretched into weeks, it became physical. The fog would cling thicker around the sinking graves. Shadows seemed longer there, bending across the stones. When I worked near them, raking or digging, I felt the soil shift beneath my boots, ever so slightly, like it was moving on its own, breathing underground. One evening, after the sun had disappeared behind thick clouds, I stayed late, determined to catch whatever was causing it. Flashlight in hand, I knelt by Weller's grave again. Light swept over the disturbed soil. I touched it, cold, colder than night air should be. My fingers sank slightly into the dirt, and for a moment, I thought I felt something beneath it, something soft and slow, like it was pushing upward. I jerked back, heart pounding. The wind stirred the dead leaves around me, rattling against headstones. I told myself it was imagination. Long days, late nights, fog and shadows playing tricks. But the fear wouldn't leave. Not that night. Not ever. I started noticing details I hadn't before. The sun hitting the stones at a certain angle, the way the fog hugged the lowest graves, the way the air felt thicker above them, heavier, pressing down. Even animals avoided the plots. Birds circled above, but never landed. Rabbits stayed in the grass edges. Nothing approached. I mentioned it to the supervisor once. Carefully. Some graves keep sinking, I said, even after repairs. The same ones. He nodded slowly, as if I had spoken the obvious. Keep an eye on them, he said. Cemeteries are old places. The earth remembers. I left it at that, but the word stuck. The earth remembers. Sometimes I think it whispers, quietly, under the graves I tend. I started visiting the cemetery at odd hours, notebook in hand, recording each grave, the depth, the soil texture, the angle of the stones. Pattern emerged, subtle but unmistakable. The same graves, every night, sinking incrementally. One night, I stayed later than usual. Fog thick, cold seeping into my boots. I knelt by one of the smaller stones. The dirt was soft beneath my palms, and I pressed down, trying to tamp it tight. My hands sank further than they should. I looked closer. Small depressions around the stone, like footprints pressed into wet soil. I froze. No one had been there. No animal tracks. Nothing in the morning had suggested activity. Yet here in the fog and cold, prints pressed into the earth, circling the stone. Uneven, deliberate, not random. The hair on my arm stood on end. I stepped back, heart pounding, tried to breathe normally. And then I saw a movement, slight, beneath the soil, a ripple like something shifting just below the surface. Not a vibration from above. Something alive, waiting, watching. I stumbled backward, almost dropping my flashlight. Beam shook, light cutting across the fog. The ripple stopped. The soil settled. Silence returned, heavier than before, pressing against my ears, my chest, my mind. I didn't sleep that night. Sat in the caretaker's shack, notebook open, pages filled with measurements and observations. Tried to make sense. Tried to rationalize. But I couldn't. The fear was raw now, crawling under my skin. Uneven ground doesn't move like this. Uneven ground doesn't remember. Weeks passed. The same graves continued to sink. I repaired them repeatedly. Each morning, markers tilted. Soil loose, yet heavy. Shadows in the fog seemed darker, longer, more patient. I began to dream of it. The grave sinking further, swallowing the flowers, the stones, everything. And in each dream, I was kneeling, powerless, hands on the soil, unable to stop it. One morning, I arrived before sunrise. Fog lingered like smoke over the low stones. I knelt at Weller's grave, heart in my throat, soil soft, cold. I pressed down, felt it shift beneath my hands. And then a whisper, not words, just a sound, low and faint, vibrating underground. I pulled back. Flashlight beam trembled across the plot. Nothing. Silence. I told myself I was tired, paranoid, fog and long nights. But the unease was undeniable. Heavy, watching, The ground beneath my hands pulsed faintly. I could feel it. Something beneath moving, patient, observant, alive. I began visiting only at night, flashlight in hand, notebook in the other, measuring, recording, observing. The same graves, same stones, same sinking. Patterns clear now, not random, deliberate, calculated. Something beneath wanted to surface, wanted recognition. One night, the fog was thickest I'd ever seen. I approached the graves carefully, boots sinking slightly into soft earth. The oldest stone, cracked and leaning, had settled farther than I remembered. I knelt, touching the soil, trying to tamp it flat. The moment my hands touched it, I felt a vibration, faint, rhythmic, like a heartbeat, beneath the ground. I pulled back, frozen, flashlight shaking. Soil shifted beneath my feet. Shadows twisted unnaturally across the gravestones. And then I heard it clearly. Not the wind, not animals. A low rumble, almost a whisper, beneath the stones. Beneath me, I staggered back, notebook dropping, heart racing, breathing ragged. The fog pressed in, heavier than air should be, almost tangible. The graves, the same ones, sinking, patient, aware, waiting for me to leave, waiting for me to see. I left before sunrise, coughing, shaking, boots wet with dew and soil, heart hammering, thoughts scattered. I couldn't explain it. I can't explain it. But I know the earth remembers. It shifts, it waits. And the same graves, the same stones, the same weight beneath the soil, they are patient, observant, alive in ways we can't measure. I come back each night. I measure. I record. I repair. And each morning, the graves sink a little more. The soil is loose, heavy, alive. Shadows twist in the fog. The air feels thicker. Waiting. Watching. The cemetery doesn't sleep. The earth doesn't forgive. And I watch. I started noticing it a week after the uneven graves became impossible to ignore. At first, I thought it was my imagination or maybe fatigue, the kind that comes from walking the cemetery for hours, raking leaves, leveling soil, repairing cracked headstones. But when I leaned close to the old McAllister stone, something froze my blood. The name had changed, not just faded, not just worn by weather. The engraving itself, fresh, sharp, spelled a name I recognized, not someone long dead, someone alive. Sitting at the diner yesterday, smiling over a coffee cup, someone I had passed on the main street just days ago. I stumbled back, hand clenching the edge of the stone, fingers scraping against cold granite. My pulse raced. Sunlight filtered through the trees, but the air felt thicker, heavier. The fog from the previous night seemed to cling still, hanging low over the earth as though it hadn't wanted to let go. I checked the other graves nearby. At first, everything looked normal. Old names, faint cracks, moss creeping along the edges. But as I moved, sweeping the dirt with my flashlight in the dim morning light, I realized more had changed. The Sullivan plot, the Henderson plot, names I'd known as long dead, had been replaced with names of living townspeople. I dropped to my knees, brushing dirt from the Sullivan stone with trembling fingers. Each letter was perfect, freshly carved. No marks from tools. No soil disturbance around the base. Just names. Names of people I had seen that week. Names of friends, neighbors, acquaintances. Names that, by rights, should not have belonged here. I want to call someone. Police. Supervisor. Anyone. But my phone had no signal. And even if it did, what would I say? The headstones are alive. They're writing themselves with the names of people who are still alive. I swallowed hard, shaking, voice dry. This isn't possible, I muttered to myself, though my own tone sounded hollow in the morning fog. That night, I returned after everyone else had gone. My truck headlights cut through the mist as I parked, engine still running. I grabbed my flashlight, notebook, and tape measure. I needed proof. I needed to understand what the hell was happening. I approached the McAllister stone first. Hands trembling, I ran a finger over the fresh engraving. Smooth, clean, precise. The letters felt cold. colder than the stones should have been in the night air. I shivered. I moved to the other graves. Each one, the Hendersons, the Sullivan, the small unmarked grave along the far fence line, had names now I recognized. Names of people I saw every day. Names of those who had waved to me in passing. Names of children laughing in the park. Names of the postman, the mayor, the butcher, all carved perfectly into cold, hard stone, as if the earth itself had decided their fate. I stepped back, breathing hard, heart pounding. There was no explanation, nothing I could rationalize. I had seen old grave settles sink, shift, but this, changing, names of the living, the rational part of my mind screamed that it had to be some kind of prank, a vandal, a group of kids with tools and skill. But the ground told me otherwise. The soil around each stone was untouched, tamped down undisturbed. No footprints, no scratch marks, just names appearing, like words being whispered into granite. I ran my hands along the Weller grave, the one that had sunk deeper than any other. It, too, now bore a new name. A neighbor's. I knew her well. Good woman, middle-aged, full of life. And yet, here she was, inscribed, permanent, below the ground where she did not belong. I backed away, my boots crunching on loose soil, tried to shake it off, tried to convince myself I was losing my mind. But the fear in my chest refused to dissipate. My hands shook, my knees trembled. Every instinct screamed to leave, to run, to never come back. But I couldn't. I had to see. I had to document. I had to understand. Over the next few days, I returned repeatedly. Each time, more names had appeared. Not just one or two, but half a row, a whole section. And the pattern was deliberate, not random. The stones closest to the entrance, closest to me, were altered first. Gradually, the changes worked their way deeper into the cemetery, as if the earth itself were creeping forward, claiming its living prey slowly, patiently. I started keeping a list. Not in my notebook this time. I was too afraid someone might see it. I wrote in the margins of old cemetery maps, careful, precise. Names, dates, positions. People who were alive yesterday, today, tomorrow. Each one seemed to pulse with an energy I couldn't name. The air around their new stones felt heavier, thicker, like it carried weight, presence. The first person I told laughed nervously. A neighbor. Must be some kind of weird engraving company prank, she said. But she didn't come with me. No one did. I stopped asking. Silence became safer. Observation alone, documentation alone, was all I could handle. Then one night it became worse. I arrived before sunset. Fog already rolling over the graves. The wind whispered through the trees, low and constant. I approached the far section, where the oldest stone stood, moss-covered, leaning, barely legible. As I shone my flashlight, I realized every stone in that row had changed. Every single one. Names of the living. Names I knew. Names I had spoken to just hours ago. Names that should have been untouched. I dropped to my knees, heart hammering, hands clutching soil, and then I saw something more. Something that made my stomach twist. Beneath one of the newer inscriptions, the soil shifted slightly, like a faint pulse. A tremor from beneath. I froze, holding my breath. The earth beneath that grave, beneath all of them, felt alive, moving, watching, waiting. The whispers began then. Not voices exactly, but a hum, faint, vibrating through the soles of my boots, my chest, my head, a frequency I could feel more than hear. Something beneath the stones reacting, responding, alive in a way no soil should be. I staggered back, flashlight trembling, illuminating stones I couldn't unsee. The names of the living stared at me, permanent, waiting. I knew some of these people would be gone soon, and when they were gone, it wouldn't be by natural causes. Something in the earth had chosen them, marked them, counted them. I returned home, locked the doors, tried to sleep, but my dreams were full of graves, rows upon rows, names of the living etched in cold stone, and beneath them movement, shadows rising from the earth, faces pressed through soil, screaming silently. The cold seeped through my skin, into my bones, and when I woke, I felt the weight of it still, the pulse in the soles of my feet, the heaviness in my chest. Days passed. I couldn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? The cemetery supervisor suggested repairs, deeper tamping of soil. I did it mechanically, numbly, documenting every change, every sinking grave, every new name. But I knew it wouldn't stop. The stones would continue, the names would continue, and the earth beneath would continue to watch. I began walking the cemetery at night, more often than day. Shadows stretched unnaturally across graves. Fog clung, thick and heavy. Every stone I passed seemed to whisper, not with sound, but with presence, names of the living, names of people I knew. And when I bent closer to examine one, the soil beneath shifted slightly, like a heartbeat, deliberate, alive. I realized, and I was no longer just a groundskeeper. I had become a witness, a recorder, a participant in something older than memory, older than the town, older than life itself. The stones were not just stone. They were sentinels. The earth beneath, patient, observant, hungry in ways I couldn't name. I've stopped trying to reason. I've stopped trying to explain. I only walk, only measure, only watch. Every day, more names appear. Friends, neighbors, strangers, people I see in the streets, the stores, the park. And beneath the soil, beneath the stones, I feel it. The pulse, the movement, the waiting. I can't leave. Not yet. Not until I understand what it wants. What it is. The cemetery has rules. I've learned. Quiet, patience, observation. And now, I understand. It collects names. Of the living. Marks them. Watches. Prepares. And one day it will claim them. I walk the rows. Flashlight in hand. Notebook under arm. Heart hammering. Knees aching. The fog rolls low. Shadows bend around the graves. And the names, always the names etched in cold stone. Names of the living. Names I know. Names that will never leave. And I watch. Rain had been falling all night. Thick, relentless. The kind that seeps into your boots and chills your bones before you even notice. I was halfway through my shift at the sheriff's office when the call came over the radio. Highway 37, stalled vehicle. Caller didn't see anyone inside. Check it out. Simple enough, I thought. Another stranded motorist. Maybe some trouble with the car. But the voice on the other end had that edge. Static crackled. Something just sounded wrong. I grabbed my coat, shoved my hands into the pockets, and stepped outside. Rain hammered the roof of the cruiser, masking any other sound. I could barely see beyond the windshield wipers, which struggled to keep up with the downpour. The drive out there wasn't long, but Highway 37 doesn't feel short when it's empty and dark, and the rain turns everything into a blur of black and gray. Trees leaned over the asphalt, wind whipping through their branches, leaves flying like paper ghosts. Every few seconds, I'd see something on the roadside, a deer maybe, or just a shadow, but the storm made it impossible to tell. By the time I reached the mile mark the call had given me, I saw it, a car, headlights off, sitting in the middle of the wet asphalt like a forgotten toy. No movement inside, no taillights, just the occasional ripple of rain dripping off the hood. I parked a safe distance away, engine running, windshield wipers clattering. My hand hovered over the door handle. My gut twisted. Years on the force had taught me that the simplest calls were sometimes the ones that ended worst. I stepped out. Rain drenched me in seconds, soaking through my coat. The highway stretched behind me into nothing, mist swallowing the white lines of the road. The car, an old sedan, dark, unremarkable, sat silent. Tires looked fine. No smoke, no obvious damage. Just abandoned. I called it in. Unit 7 on scene. Vehicle appears empty. No hazards. Standing by. Static crackled over the radio, louder than before. Then a voice, barely above the storm, whispered my name. I froze. Sheriff. Sheriff. I spun. Flashlight slicing through sheets of rain, but nothing. The trees swayed. The asphalt gleamed. The car sat there, silent. I told myself it was the wind, stress, loneliness out here at night. I shook my head and approached the car. Door locked. I rapped on the window. No movement. No answer. And then I saw her. Inside. Passenger seat. Head turned slightly. Staring at me through the rain-streaked glass. A young girl, maybe 12, soaked, eyes wide, expression blank. I blinked. My heart hammered. I rolled back a step. "Ma'am, you okay?" I shouted over the storm. She didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. I circled to the driver's side. Empty. No footprints leading to the car. No tire tracks aside from the ones that carried the car here. Nothing. Nothing but rain, wind, and her. I checked the back seat. Empty. No bags. No signs of life. No signs of struggle. Just a girl, silent, still. "Ma'am." My voice caught in my throat. "Are you hurt? Can you?" She tilted her head, and then I noticed she wasn't wet from the rain. Not her hair, not her coat, not the skin I could see pressed to the window. Dry, perfectly dry, as if she'd been there untouched while the storm soaked everything around her. The hairs on my neck rose. I swallowed hard, hand hovering near my holster, mind racing. My training screamed for caution, but my heart screamed something else. Get out. Get out now. Before I could move, the engine of the car sputtered. Lights flickered. Not from inside. There was no one in the driver's seat, but the car jolted just slightly. Tires squealed on wet asphalt. And then headlights flashed, briefly illuminating the trees behind me. I spun around. Nothing. Just rain, dark, empty highway. When I turned back, the girl had moved. She wasn't where I'd seen her in the passenger seat. The window reflected only darkness. I froze. I called it in again. "Unit 7, there's a minor situation. Stand by." My words fell hollow, swallowed by the rain and static. I edged toward the car, flashlight quivering. The girl reappeared in the back seat, eyes locked on mine. She mouthed something. I couldn't hear it over the storm, but the movement of her lips was deliberate. "Run." I bolted back to the cruiser, heart hammering. Rain slapped me like fists, soaking my face. My mind reeled. She had vanished before I reached the passenger door. No footprints. No wet streaks. Nothing. I slammed the driver's side door of the cruiser, locked it, and revved the engine. Radio crackled again. My own voice came over it. But not mine. Not exactly. It said, "Sheriff, don't leave." Static ripped through the speakers. I grabbed the mic. "Unit 7 here." "Who's that?" "State your call sign." Silence. Just the rain. Just the highway. And somewhere, deep under the roar of the storm, the whisper came again. "Highway 37 waiting." I floored it. Tires hissed on wet asphalt. Windshield wipers barely keeping up. Every nerve in my body screamed. Behind me, faint in the rear view, I thought I saw headlights. Another car? Couldn't be. The road had been empty for miles. My pulse pounded. Eyes darted to the side mirror. No one. Just rain, darkness. The occasional flash of lightning revealing twisted trees lining the highway like black. Watching sentinels. I reached the next mile marker. Nothing. The storm swallowed everything. But the memory of her, of that blank stare, of dry hair in the soaking storm, haunted me. And the voice, my own voice, distorted and whispering through static, repeating my name, calling me back. I reported it again. Highway clear. Vehicle empty. No sign of anyone. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped the mic. Back at the station, I reviewed the reports. The car, empty. No missing persons. No accidents. No calls from that stretch of highway in the past month. Not a single report. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. And every time it rains, every time the sky turns dark over Highway 37, I feel the pull. The way the wind whispers my name. The way the empty road stretches forever. Sometimes I think about going back, checking the mile markers, watching the shadows, seeing if the girl is still there, watching for the distorted voice through the static. But I don't. Not anymore. I've learned the highway doesn't care for logic or patrols or the living. It has its own rules, its own occupants. And some nights, you are meant to be the one it calls. I still drive that road sometimes in the day. Never alone. Always alert. Always wondering. And I remember that night in the rain, the car, the girl, the whispers, and the way the storm seemed alive, bending the shadows, holding the darkness just long enough for me to feel it, waiting for me to answer again. I woke before dawn, as I usually do. The cemetery was quiet, empty but for the mist curling along the gravestones like smoke over cold marble. The frost clung to the grass, wetting my boots with every step. I thought I knew these grounds. I thought I knew every plot, every row, every name etched into granite or marble. But this morning was different. I had been walking the northern section, where the new burials were marked for next week. The ground was freshly tilled, mounds of soil neatly stacked beside each grave, headstones leaning against wooden supports, waiting. My flashlight cut through the gray mist, illuminating the freshly turned dirt and polished stone. And then I saw it, my name, carved into a headstone that hadn't been there yesterday. Not a weathered stone, not a new one placed by the town mason. It was perfect, sharp letters, crisp and clean, glinting faintly in the early light. My own name, James Callahan, and the grave in front of it. The soil was already turned, open, ready, waiting. I froze. My stomach dropped. My hands went cold. My breath fogged in the icy morning air. I wanted to tell myself it was a prank, a mistake, but no prankster could have done this overnight without leaving footprints or disturbance. And the ground was perfect, too perfect. I stepped closer. Dirt crumbled slightly under my boots, the mound rising unevenly like it had been tamped down by unseen hands. I reached out, fingertips brushing the edge of the soil, and felt the chill seep straight through my gloves into my bones. Some instinct, somewhere deep in my mind, screamed at me to run, but my curiosity, my need to understand, kept me rooted. I couldn't look away. Not yet. I circled the grave slowly, flashlight in one hand, shovel in the other, though I didn't want to touch it. My reflection caught on the polished stone. My own pale face, eyes wide, lips pressed tight. And beneath the mist, the earth seemed to pulse faintly, a rhythm I couldn't explain, like the heartbeat of the ground itself. I sank to my knees, hands shaking. The dirt was soft, freshly turned, yes, but there was more to it. The smell wasn't just soil. There was something else buried in the air, something earthy and metallic, faint but unmistakable. Blood? Or something older, something soil and decay had kept hidden? I couldn't tell. I didn't want to know. I backed away, gasping, trying to shake off the fear clawing up my chest. And that's when I heard it. A whisper, soft, dry, like leaves scraping together in the wind, but more deliberate. My name, James. I spun. No one. Just mist. Just a rows of graves stretching out like teeth, biting at the fog. I told myself it was my imagination, the early hour, the weight of all the graves I had walked over in my life. But the whisper came again, a little louder this time, closer. James. I dropped the shovel, gripping the edge of the open grave instead. The earth seemed to breathe. The shadows inside shifted slightly, as if something had moved just below the surface. My hands shook. My knees trembled. I could feel the pull of it, the way the ground seemed to want me to look deeper, to reach inside. I stumbled backward, tripping over the mound, landing hard in wet grass. My breath came in ragged gasps. My mind raced. This wasn't a normal day at the cemetery. This wasn't a prank. This was different. I tried to steady myself. Looked around. Everything was the same, yet wrong. The other graves seemed darker, the mist thicker, and all around, faint indentations appeared in the soil. Not footprints, more like impressions. Impressions of something kneeling, crouching, waiting, but no one was there. Not a single living soul. I want to call the police, to run back to the house, to tell anyone, but my voice was gone. The words stuck in my throat. Even if I had called, what would I have said? My grave, it's ready? No one would have believed me. No one could. So I stayed. I watched. I waited. And then I noticed the shadows along the edges of the graveyard. Long, twisting shapes at the edge of the mist. I thought they were trees at first. Or perhaps the fences warped by the dawn light. But no, they moved. Not quickly, not violently, but deliberately, inching toward me, watching, waiting. I stepped back toward the truck parked at the edge of the cemetery, but the ground seemed to stretch beneath my feet. Every step forward felt slower, heavier. The shadows advanced just as slowly. My heart pounded. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But something held me there, compelled me to look down, to see. The dirt at my feet shivered. Small lumps, subtle, like tiny hands pushing from below. I stumbled back again, falling to my hands and knees. The whisper rose, a chorus now, more than one voice, all calling my name. James, James, James. I want to cover my ears, to scream, but I couldn't. The sound burrowed into me, into my chest, my skull, into the very marrow of my bones. And then, in the pale gray light of the morning, I saw it. Inside the open grave, beneath the fresh dirt, the shape of a body, not fully formed, not solid, but clear enough. My own, pale, hollow, limbs tucked neatly, as if sleeping, but the outline unmistakably mine. And my heart froze. I scrambled backward, hands clawing at the grass, rain slicking everything, sliding me across the dirt. My breathing was ragged, wet, loud. The whispers became louder, more insistent, circling me now, as if the wind itself carried them, shaping them, molding them into my name. I tried to run. I tried to call out. My voice failed. My boots sank slightly into the soft soil, as if the cemetery itself didn't want me to leave. The shadows thickened, twisting around the headstones. The mist grew heavy, pressing against my chest. And then I noticed something else. Around the other graves, new marks appeared. Tiny mounds, shallow depressions, each one subtly shaped like a person kneeling, facing toward me, waiting, watching. I realized I wasn't alone. I never had been. The cemetery had always been alive in a way I hadn't understood. It had rules, patterns, and I had crossed one. I stumbled toward the edge of the plot, toward the truck, toward anything that promised escape. The whispers followed. The ground pulsed beneath my feet, faint at first, then stronger, like a heartbeat. My own pulse mirrored by the soil itself. I reached the truck, shaking, drenched, mud caking my boots. I looked back. The open grave waited. My name glinted on the polished stone. The soil pulsed slightly, as if something below breathed. And in the mist, the shadows kneeling, crouching, watching. I climbed into the driver's seat, hands trembling on the wheel. Engine roared. Headlights cut through the fog. Rain splashed against the windshield. But the whisper remained, faint now, persistent, somewhere beneath the roar of the storm. I drove away. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Even now, days later, I think about it. I dream about it. The grave, my name, the open soil, and the way the whispers call, patient and unending. I know I'm not safe. Not yet. Not until they decide. The cemetery has marked me, chosen me, and one day soon, the earth will claim me as it claims all those whose names appear on stones. I wake at dawn, check the plots, walk the rows, measure the mounds, record the names. Always my own, waiting, already prepared. And I know tomorrow the burial will be mine.